Peter Underhill.
Joyce Boyardi.
Jody Garson.
John Lort.
Kathy McInnes.
Michael Crone.
Thank you, everyone. At risk of sounding like a broken record, just ask that everybody make sure they're at a microphone when they're speaking for public record. Please identify yourselves and respect your neighbors and other attendees by keeping it to a very, very dull roar or whisper so that we can all hear and our audience can hear. So thank you very much. First on the agenda is the Oak Grove Farm Commission, Community and Preservation. Gentlemen, thank you for coming.
Evening, folks.
So I'm Jim McKay. I'm representing the Community Preservation Committee. I'm a voting member at large, and with us is David Werner from the Oak Grove Commission. I've been working with Dave on this project for, Dave, what's it been, 3 years now?
Two.
2.
Only seems like 3.
There's many members at the table that are much aware of this project. Kathy's the liaison for your committee to the community preservation. John remembers this all went in front of the commission, and they gave was it an NOI, John, you gave?
Right, yep.
For the
Yep.
project. I'll give the vote of the committee first, and then Dave can give you a synopsis of the work being done. It was presented on time with the right paperwork, with the right breakdown of work that was being done, the cost estimates, for one of the most pristine properties in the town of Millis. I mean, the Oak Grove property is one, if not the only properties that's maintained as well as it is by maybe 6 or 7 volunteers. You go down the hallway, you can meet all, the 5 of them that take care of this property. So when it came in front of us, we all knew that this was a great project when it originally came in front of us. At the time, we felt that the DPW could help and assist in a lot of ways of this project, but it fell into a lot of red tape. The DEP got involved with it, and it sent us back from a project that was low in cost and little work to be done to a major project. Most of the funding for the project was used for engineering because of what was required of them to do. And there's a little work that the town, meaning the DPW, have to do on this project, and we'll take that in conjunction with the Oak Grove. There's catch basins on Island Road and on Ridge Street that need to be repaired and brought up to standards of stormwater management. And we will do that in conjunction with them. And in any way the DPW can and save costs in this project, we will assist the Oak Grove Farm Commission, as we always do. Works hand in hand. Both committees work very well together. The DPW superintendent never hastily wastes time to going up to assist the Oak Grove Farm Commission. So with that, I think if you have any questions for the Community Preservation Committee, it was unanimously voted in favor of this project. Everybody was in favor of it. And Dave can give a little synopsis of the work if you want.
We'd appreciate it. I'd appreciate it, yeah, please. Thank you.
Do you have, Jim said he prepared some, if you, it'd probably be easier to follow if you take a look. I have a big set of plans here. I don't know how to best show you this. You have maps for everybody?
Yep, they all have it. Yep.
We have some B-size prints.
You all have these?
Yep.
Yep. So we can get, I don't think you'll need the detail. We can get through most of it on the first page. So down in the far right-hand corner is Trail Restoration 1 and 2. That's one of the places where we have road drainage from Island Road. And DPW is going to put a little drainage in there. Further up, we're going to put some gravel in where we're not in wetlands. The big controversy of the project is we originally just wanted to put down 6 inches of gravel in the places that we were on the edge of wetlands. On the Ridge Street side and somewhat on the Island Road side, it's impassable if the weather's wet or in winter. And that's what we're trying to address. We're trying to make the property passable year-round. It was so bad that the cross-country team who was running their meets here were losing their shoes, where we're going to do some Seriously, where we're gonna, Jim's gonna put in a new, enlarged catch basement area. So, on the Island Road, you can see that it's just that one area, there's gonna be some gravel, there's going to be a new little drainage catch basin area. If you go to areas 3, 4, 5, starting on the right-hand side, before the little bridge icon, that's gonna be 6 inches of gravel with some drainage that comes off Ridge Street. We're gonna improve the drainage there. That plan's been approved by Concon. And we have a boardwalk on the other side of the bridge, which doesn't show on these plans. The yellow areas with little cross sections show where we're putting boardwalks. And these are necessary. This is where DEP got involved and said, if you put gravel down, you're filling the wetlands, you can't do that, you have to put boardwalks down. And that's essentially doubled, almost trebled the cost of the project. So on Ridge Street, we have a big problem with an existing catch basin. Jim's gonna come in and his folks are gonna improve the drainage, put down some large rocks and improve the erosion situation. We're just gonna level where the trail is now, put a boardwalk on it. The next section further up on Ridge Street, where you see the dots, that's partially in wetland and that's partially bordering wetland. But DEP accepted the engineering request, or their recommendation that gravel would be more efficient. So there's just going to be 6 inches of gravel spread in that area. Although 6 and 6A are removed from the project for DEP purposes, and if you were familiar with the property, this is where the causeway crosses from the main parking lot and comes up into the middle field. We're going to all redo that with gravel. It's a matter of public safety as well as trail safety. That's really the only fire access in. And if that were to get bogged down, or a truck would get bogged down there and we had trouble, we'd be in a bad way. That's just going to be leveled and gravelled. It's really not in itself a large expense, except for the environmental fencing.
Mr. Warner, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Would you clarify real quick? You said removed, DEP removed from the project. Can you just clarify that for us? It sounds like you are doing work, but it's not outside of their domain.
That,
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll address that. When the Conservation Commission walked the property, we deemed that that was an existing road and not a trail. And as an existing road, the area had already been disturbed. There are culverts underneath that road. So it's really not a trail, it's a road. And as a road, it did not really fall under the Wetlands Protection Act or the Millis wetland bylaws like the rest of the trails did. So that was excluded, and that was unanimous that everybody in the Conservation Commission was agreed with that.
So it's very, just to clarify, it's very much part of the project. It's just not part of the environmental, there's not an environmental concern there that we would
Exactly.
involve.
Right, and it didn't change the cost.
Okay.
The cost was other areas.
Okay. Thank you.
and there's a similar crossing that you can see on the far left on 6 and 6A, where there's just a little culvert. It's about 100 feet, which will be gravel. And the final piece of the project is over on Exchange and behind the houses on Orchard Street. And that's Red Maple Swamp. And we have existing pieces of boardwalk down that are 20 years old, and what we're hoping to do in all these situations is to put down parallel 2-foot sections of boardwalk so that it can handle two-way traffic. So that's the largest section of boardwalk and the greatest expense.
Okay.
Any questions? Mr. Stedman, thanks for your help on that.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, Mr. Chair, in closing, the money aspect of it, I'll give you a brief synopsis of that. The committee voted $34,237, or, we did vote for your recommendation and the select board's approval and town meeting's vote of $34,237.68. And this is an FY23 project because the funds are already in, we have those funds in the bank, so we can, once the town meeting vote, those monies can be dispersed the very next day. So this work can start early. It's not an FY24 project, it's an FY23 project. And that's great news because, you know, after May, that's when we usually get into our dry season, and everybody's gonna be able to get out there and, you know, start work and hopefully get it done. You know, mainly for the track team that comes in, I believe they use that in the fall. And it's widely used by the schools. And most of the different schools love the track meet that they come over and participate at Oak Grove. I encourage you all to go up there. I've never seen it look as pristine as it has this year. It's just, you drive by it, it's glowing. The work that these people do on a basis, it just makes a project so, you know, when somebody comes to a committee, you know it's the right group to give it to, you know, because they're gonna take care of it. And it's a long-term thing. It's just not a group that's, you know, they've been there. I don't even want to give the years that the people have been there. And, you know, as people start to wind down in their, whatever they do in their life, it's been a pleasure working with them over the 18, 19 years that I've been here. And it's always been a pleasure. There's never been a dispute of nothing. And, you know, these people use their own equipment, they use their own tractors, they use their own shovels, and they're up there every day. Every day you go up there, you'll find one of them, if not 2, 3, 4 of them, up there every single day working in this large piece of property.
And without DPW's cooperation and efforts, this project had probably run into hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we're deeply grateful to Jim and DPW for their assistance and their dedication to this. I mean, this is truly a town-wide effort.
And that's how the town should work. That's just how we all should work.
Well, thank you both. Any questions from the committee? Go ahead, Scott.
Scott Fusey, 411 Union, someone who lives in Oak Grove Farms. I want to thank the Oak Grove Farm Commission, Steve McGinnis, John McAvoy, Jim, and his staff. I mean, I'm up there. I went up there one day, and they were up there cutting trees and cutting brush, and it's true. It looks phenomenal. It's a pleasure. It's a property we should all be proud of in town, and it's busy. You go up there on the weekends on a nice day, the playground, the trails are packed. You guys have really done a nice job up there, and it's all volunteers. That's what it takes to make this property up there, and thank you to everybody involved that works hard every day. So thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Scott.
Quick question, duration of the project and any trail closures during the construction or work?
There won't really be closures except for the causeway, and the rest of the property be open when we'll may have to have a police detail down there or something, but that's a one-day project, don't you think?
Yeah. Each road will, catch basin will take each day, and that'll be on the DPW because it's on our town property, so we will have to pay for the details. It's not coming out of this project.
Well, we budgeted for you, so you're in good shape.
Buy some extra gravel.
Get some lunch.
Okay.
It's against the law to do that.
Thank you very much. I echo all of the thanks, and collaboration, cooperation are always a good thing, so thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
I'm sure they're going to.
Oh, yeah, having fun.
Okay, next on the agenda, Mr. John Barry is going to present the Capital Planning Committee review of projects and capital requests. Wherever you're comfortable, sir. Defer to you. You may.
All right. Thank you all. It's good to see you all again. I'm John Barry, Chair of the Capital Planning Committee, and I guess before I get started, I'll add my thanks to the Oak Grove Commission. We are big users of Oak Grove in our family, so we're really happy to see all that work getting done. So I think you're all generally familiar with the Capital Planning Committee and kind of what we've been doing, but just maybe as a quick reminder, so the Planning Committee's been in existence for about 6 years now, and we've been tasked with two jobs, really. One is trying to get the big picture of all the capital needs of the town over the long term, trying to compile that together in some sort of organized way. And then secondarily, as capital requests come up through each of the budgeting cycles, we assess those various capital requests from all the different departments and have come up with a process with which to categorize them into higher priority, medium priority, lower priority projects. So that's information we can give to you, to the select board and other interested parties, just to help you make decisions as you're thinking about where the town should be spending funds on different things. And I guess that's a key. We're an information source more than anything else. We are not necessarily recommending projects or recommending funding. We're just giving you information per what we've best been able to gather. So this cycle, we did assess 10 projects, which are all summarized in the report that I've shared with the committee. 5 of those projects ended up in the highest priority category per our assessment. 4 were medium priorities, 1 was a lower priority. Those highest priorities included the PFAS well design, the engineering design for the PFAS treatment on well number 3. That was about $272,000. Chlorine analyzer, chlorine/pH analyzer for about $31,000. 2 projects for the library, one doing some repairs on the building envelope around some leaks and things that are potentially developing there, and also replacing, I should say, the lighting management system, which has been out of order for some time now. And then finally, the last highest priority item on our list was a new dump truck for the DPW, which has been on the list for a while as a capital replacement need. So that one we've known about for a while, and its time has finally come. So that all totals about $540,000 of items there. And I should say, we spent time through this process with each of the departments. They came, they explained the needs, went through, the rationale for all of these different projects, and we had a good discussion with all of them as we went along. Medium priorities, a couple related to the school. One was a data center upgrade for storage of data digitally, as well as a wireless upgrade at the school. HVAC upgrades for this building, and finally a aerial boom lift, which is a sort of a crane-like machine to get to high areas and do work at height, which the town currently rents those out from time to time when they're needed, so we're looking to purchase one. Then finally, the lower priority at this time was a trailer for the DPW, which would be used to move equipment around for various projects around town. And I'd say, and I think I say this every time, all of these projects are important. There's no doubt in our mind that they are all important things that the town will almost certainly need at some point. So that's part of our job as the committee, is to try to assess, how urgent is the need now? So for example, the 2 school items, the data center and the wireless upgrade, no question, those will need to be upgraded at some point. Just as we went through the process, speaking with the school department, we felt per our criteria, maybe there was a little bit more life in those, so that would kind of went down to the medium upgrade, or the medium priority. That said, it could very quickly go to the high priority list. Tomorrow it could go to the high priority list if the wireless system fails, for example. So this is a very fluid list, I'd just say. We've also, we continue to refine our process, so one thing we've changed a little bit this year is how we're categorizing the longer-term needs of the town and trying to get a little more detail on that. So we've kind of broken that list into 3 categories of items. This is the kind of table in the back here. So the first category is things that are maintenance and repair of existing capital. So this would be, building repairs, for example, road repairs, things of that nature, and, police cars that we know will come up, every year for replacement, those sorts of things. Second category is enterprise system-related needs, the treatment plants for the wells, some of the infiltration and whatever the word is.
Inflow, yep.
That one, yes, inflow. Those types of projects, some of the stormwater types of projects would fall into that category. And then finally, other capital needs, which in some ways is probably the most visible ones. These tend to be the bigger ticket items. So renovations to the middle high school, for example, the senior center type projects that, came up last year, athletic fields, those sorts of things. Those are falling into that category. So don't take other as like not important. Those are big projects for the most part that, do get a lot of attention and discussion. So we thought that might be a little bit, that might be helpful to the various committees to help them as they're thinking about all the capital needs of the town. You'll see the numbers, they are big, $89 million for all these items. That is roughly a 10-year number, but some of these items are somewhat indeterminate as to when they would actually occur, if at all. So again, that's a fluid number too, that will change over time. But why don't I pause there for a moment, and I'm happy to take any questions on either the process or any of the specific items that we took a look at.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Crum?
With respect to the data center upgrade, its storage
Yeah.
capacity,
Yes.
have they looked at cloud storage?
Yes.
And this wasn't an option?
So it is an option. The cloud storage is an option. I apologize, I don't remember all the details. They came to us about a year, I guess it was a year ago, with a, servers, kind of, physical servers option. From what I recall, this option actually did include some components of cloud storage. And I know they have a new IT director who's been thinking about different ways of approaching this. So I apologize, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I do believe there was a cloud storage component to this, and it wasn't all physical servers. Whereas that was different from a year ago.
One other question, on
Yeah.
the lighting management system,
Yeah.
$110,000.
Yes.
All the lighting in the building doesn't cost $110,000, but what is this management system?
Yeah, so when the building was built, let's see if I can describe this right, and you guys will be familiar with this as well. There's a lighting management system in place, so, the lights would come on, off and on at various times that the building was open. That system is basically failed, essentially. So and this has been over a year, probably close to 2 years now, that system just does not work properly. So the library staff has to go in and sort of manually make adjustments to the system so they can get the lights to go on and off at the time that the library needs to be open. The company that put the system in place is no longer in existence, so you can't get them to come and do any repairs to it. So that system needs to be replaced in its entirety so that the lighting can be, controlled. And with that comes actually replacement of certain sections of lighting as well, as far as I understand. So there's sort of two things going on here. There's the actual system that will control the lighting, and there's replacement of certain elements of the lighting itself. So that's...
I'm just going to
that's
pile
part of
on,
it.
just because
Yeah.
I was on the capital planning committee and was as familiar as John is with this. It can be centrally controlled, it's proprietary, and it's inoperable. What brings me to the question, though, and I don't remember this, the $110,000 figure, my question is, how much has that grown over the last 2-3 years since we've seen
Yeah,
this?
so from...
And
Oh, yeah.
where
But-
did the number come from?
Yeah, so it came from the library department. So the library actually, over the past year, I think it was maybe 6 months ago or something, did commission a capital needs study. So building, kind of all the needs they would need. So they've actually thought this through pretty well. I think the Friends were able to pay for a study through some funds they raised. So they laid out all the various capital needs for the building for the next several years. This was already a known need, but they kind of incorporated that into the study. So from what I recall, and I probably don't have my numbers right, this number for just the management system itself was probably 50,000 or 60,000 or maybe something in that neighborhood, from what I can recall. I think the additional monies are related to the new lighting, fixtures and components that would go as part of it. That's my recollection anyways. I'd have to look back at my notes for all that, so kind of going off the top of my head here.
Mr. Chair? I'm sorry.
Mr. Underhill?
Just Mr. Koenig, do you have more
Nope.
questions before I
Right.
talk? Question on this system, I'm intimately familiar with Lutron systems here. Is this a case that, because I've been to the library, love it, the lights were on when I was there.
Yeah.
Is this a case that the librarians want a system where they don't have to put on a light switch, or is this a fire safety issue as well, that the lights need to come on in case of an emergency? Like how
Yeah.
critical is this repair?
I don't know the answer to the latter part of the question as far as emergency, lighting involved. What I do know is it is extremely manual. And by that, I mean people are like, have to like get up on, chairs to go be turning things off and on. And if there's an event going on, somebody's got to be there at the end of the night to turn the lights off, basically. I don't know the question about the emergency. I would imagine that's part of it, to be frank. I don't see how it kind of couldn't be.
Typically, it's a means of egress. When a fire alarm goes off,
Exactly.
the lights have to come up
Yeah.
automatically. And that's why these systems need to be repaired so quickly.
And I've got to believe, I don't remember that detail coming up, but I've got to believe that's part of
Okay,
part of
just
what's going on
thank you.
there. Yeah.
Okay, I've got a couple more questions. I'm going
Yeah.
to keep going since
All right.
nobody else has. I guess the elephant in the room is if and when there is no funding for capital requests this year, or perhaps, very few of these.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, I suppose that we will see all of these next year, unless there's a windfall of cash, we'll see them in the fall. Any of these make you, based on what you know and your meeting and your committee proceedings, make you think that, this absolutely, does a highest priority to you mean this must be funded between, now, or
yeah.
how much,
There's
which of
not-
these are at the highest risk of failure between?
Yeah. There's, what's the highest of the highest, sort of, yeah. So that's probably an easy answer. It's the first two. It's the DPW items. The PFAS design and the chlorine analysis, those have to be done. That's a public safety issue that has to be dealt with. I don't think there's really any way around that. It really is funding's a little different for those. Could you get by another year without fixing the envelope repairs on the library? Probably. Could you get by another year without fixing the lighting system? Probably. Dump truck? Probably. But one day that stuff's going to fail and the dump truck doesn't work, or the lights don't come on.
Or they get stuck on,
or
like
they
that
get
school
stuck
we
on,
read about, yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, that was the same system.
So, yeah, but if you only had a few dollars, just, well, a few. It's
Million?
not a few dollars, but the top two on the list would be the highest priorities.
Okay, all right. Any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Barry.
All right, thank you, and I'd like to thank our newest member from the Finance Committee, Mr.
Thank you. It's
Lohr,
good to be
who's
on it.
been a great contributor to the process and brought some new ways of looking at things, so.
I'm sure he only
appreciate
raised
it.
the bar.
Well, it was a low one to start with, so. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, just a follow-up.
Please.
Regarding the library and the lighting, there's a handout from the library committee talking about the assessment of the electrical that talks about the emergency lighting, the exterior lighting, and some interior lightings, which result in that 110,000.
Yep. All right, I'll invite Mr. Craig Gibbons. He's going to tell us about one of the warrant articles, which is a net zero goal for the town.
That's a nice continuation.
Good evening. Craig Gibbons, 8 Pack Lane, here tonight in representation of the Millis Energy Committee. We've put forth a request via Article 13 to make a statement about our intent to pursue a net zero goal in terms of carbon emissions for the year 2050. This is motivated heavily by our participation since 2014 in the Green Communities Program. This is a program that the Energy Committee has depended on heavily to make sure that various programs that are in the spirit of the committee can be funded effectively, where funds otherwise would not be available, to pursue a number of projects. These are energy efficiency projects throughout the building, so the energy management system in this building, or I should say the temperature systems, are in part funded by those programs. Envelope or sealing and making our buildings tighter to improve heating and cooling efforts and so on are all those types of things that have been funded through those, our participation in the green communities. The Green Community Program has, when we started, there were a number of communities, but not as many as there are today. There are 300 communities in that program. And the folks that manage that Green Communities Program are changing the requirements to become in line with some of the things that the state and federal and other programs have done to pursue a net zero energy goal by 2050. What that's doing is potentially, or what we're seeing as we look into some of their initial actions, is potentially shifting how people would qualify for those funds in the future. Since 2014, we've been the recipient of about $1.2 million in assistance from the Green Community and other programs like that. And so to remain in good favor, and to remain a good citizen of that green community effort, we want to put forth the statement, as is many other communities in Massachusetts, to remain in good faith with the spirit of that green communities, but also start to align with some of their heavier requirements, which is, as an Energy Committee, we will start to put forth some plans and ideas about how we might be able to pursue a net zero goal by 2050. For those of you that aren't as familiar with that, just maybe a quick backdrop. So net zero is intended to really reduce or reverse, if possible, the amount of greenhouse gases that we emit into the atmosphere through our use of primarily fossil fuels. So a lot of the fuels we use, 75% of the problem is with the use of fossil fuels, so gas, whether that be natural or other fuels. That's what we're talking about and trying to reduce our use of those. So things like thinking about an alternative solution when a heating system goes down. Can we use a heat pump, which is dependent on electricity, not using fossil fuels, versus a traditional natural gas or other system that might require the use of fuels that contribute to elevated greenhouse gases. So the article that's put forth is really intended to be step one of multiple steps that we are going to undertake to remain in good faith and in alignment with the new requirements of this Green Community Program by sharing that we as a community embrace the idea that this is something that should be done, and that we will put our best efforts forth in partnership with all other committees and departments of the municipality to consider when we need to make a decision that could impact greenhouse gases, something that is leveraging renewables or contributing to a reduced use of those fossil fuels. I'll pause there. I've said a lot of things, but questions or initial thoughts you had?
Mr. Stedman?
Is the scope of this just for town-owned buildings and property, or is it the entire community?
So the initial intent is really to focus on the municipality as we have. Our goal is to actually provide education beyond that to help homeowners and residents as well.
Second question, do you get any credits or any benefits for reforestation?
We do. That is actually one of the modalities of trying to recuperate carbon from the atmosphere, as well as oceans and mechanical processes that are still being developed. Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Crone?
So the way I read this, it really is an encouragement for the select board to begin the process of coming up with some ideas and potentially some programs. But there's nothing mandated in this particular warrant article.
No. So it is exactly that. It's acting in the spirit of what that Green Community Program is aligning themselves to do. No initial commitment, really just a consideration when decisions come up that could influence that, to consider alternatives that would be beneficial from a carbon perspective.
Ms. Garzon?
Thank you for the work that you've put into this. I know that as a town, we've done a lot of work in securing green, becoming a green communities, and then working through those programs, and we've reduced our energy usage, been able to initiate several programs that have saved the town money, townspeople's money. I like that this is continuing to move us forward. It's not committing us to concrete actions at this point, because there are dollars involved with some of these mitigation efforts. Some are easy and some are not, but yeah, I think as we want to stay within the Green Communities program and be able to access those grant funding, and thank you for bringing us the number. I think you said, I can't read my writing, 1.2 million. That's great. I mean, those are funds that we wouldn't have had access to without the actions that we've taken. So I think this is great. Thanks.
Thank you.
I had a couple questions. Along the lines of the 1.2, I know LED streetlights is one of those programs funded. Can you give us some examples? And it's really for the greater audience. What are some of those projects that were funded by the 1.2, just quickly?
Yes, so you mentioned the conversion of the streetlights from non-LED to LED. That includes the decorative lights that we have on Main Street, so converting all of those to a lower or more energy efficient. A lot of the buildings that have needed renovations, so even just using the animal building as an example, those heating and cooling systems needed to be replaced. Other things needed to be replaced to seal that building more effectively so that it didn't require as much heating and fueling. Variable flow drives in all of our pump buildings for our the water buildings, I guess it would be, throughout the town. A number of trying to think of other specifics, but a number of other smaller projects too that just, actually larger ones in the school where we changed the entire envelope of that building to, again, maintain the internal temperatures more effectively, reducing heating and cooling costs there, as well as some other projects in and around refrigeration and areas like that. So number of projects, it's been 8 years, so apologies, I'm not as quick as I used to be on some of those, but we can itemize that if there's further interest too for others.
Craig, who authored this statement? Is this boilerplate from the community or, greenhouse communities, or is this something locally authored?
So this is something locally offered. We actually took inspiration from some of the other communities that had put together statements, and so this is what's kind of the going norms of some of those statements.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay. None heard. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, our next agenda item is petition to article discussion. So I guess we'll start with the 5G article, so that's going to be article number...
Always the last one.
Is it 19?
Yep.
So we've had presentations from Ms. Burke. There's been some supplemental information that's been provided this week, both for and against, frankly, the article. So that's been provided to committee members. It's posted to our website. I'm not sure if everybody's had the time to review it. I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to discuss it within the committee. We don't have to vote it tonight. I'm prepared to vote it tonight, but that's not to say that we have to. We can have discussion on it this week. We can have discussion on it again next week. We have to vote it by next week. So if you haven't had the time, if you haven't had the time to review the material, and there's a substantial amount of material, then I wouldn't feel comfortable voting it, So
How do you word
it's
it?
open for discussion.
I propose that we do vote on it.
Mr. Chair?
I'm-
Ms.
I'm sorry,
McGinnis.
go ahead.
I'm comfortable voting on it tonight, discussing it and voting it.
I'm just curious, the planning board had requested town council opinion, and if anything
you.
had come in?
So you are correct, and I did communicate with the planning board. Essentially, the opinion was that it's not, the legal opinion that they received back is it's not germane to the planning board, as I recall. So they did seek legal opinion, but they didn't get one necessarily, for or against, so.
And what about the Board of Health?
Board of Health, I spoke with, I always get Mr. McVeigh and Mr. McAvoy,
McVeigh.
Mr. McVeigh confused. And I did speak with John. They, as I recall, would not be taking a vote on it, and didn't have much in the way of opinion to offer either way on it. So if those that, now's the time, we need to move on it one way or another, can't let it hang here. So I will take a motion if we want to discuss and vote. I wouldn't, I'm comfortable either way.
I move that we vote on, I recommend that we vote on this article.
Well, I need a motion to approve or a motion to recommend dismissal. I think is probably the two prudent options.
Okay. No,
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to dismiss Article 19.
I second.
Recommend.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to recommend dismissal of Article 19. Discussion, please.
I'm curious why we can't vote that the committee's opinion is negative on this, rather than saying yes, rather than defer and have the uncertainty of that. Is there a reason why we can't just say, we recommend that the town reject this article and vote no?
That's what was
That's
just
what we're
moved.
doing.
You're deferring.
No,
The
no,
motion
No,
is to
recommend dismissal.
Dismissal.
dismissal. So that's a
Not
no.
a deferral.
That's a no.
That's the same thing.
Yes.
Okay.
And ideally, when I went on my long preamble, was the opportunity for people to say that they agree or disagree with the premise of the article, and then that would form the basis for,
Okay.
potentially, for a motion. You know, I'm eager to hear your opinions, and we're in the discussion, so now's your time to convince people to vote your way. Mr. Crum.
You know, with respect to what I said last week, I think that we are not experts in 5G. This is a much larger issue than the Finance Commission. And it's simply a recommendation to the Select Board to write this letter. And I think if the Select Board feels comfortable enough at any time in the next year that they have the facts and information, if our Board of Health says yay or nay, then I think, we don't need a warrant article to tell the Select Board to do something or recommend that they do something. I'm sure that if they've got enough information to show that there is potential harm to the citizenry of Millis, that they'll do such a thing and write that letter. So my recommendation is to go no as well.
So your recommendation would be to vote yes for dismissal,
Yes.
just to clarify.
I just have someone from the state has their hand up that would like to weigh in on this.
From the state?
Cecilia Doucette, I believe.
Okay. Ms. Doucette, we can hear you. I'm not sure if you can hear, well, we can't hear you. Please let us know if you can hear us, and the floor is yours.
I can hear you. I am the Director of Massachusetts for Safe Technology, and thank you for your careful consideration of this warrant article. I have some information that might prove helpful in your deliberations, and I prepared a statement that I emailed over to the chair and to Ms. Gilmore this afternoon. So I'll go ahead and read that to you. And I ask that you distribute it out to the full committee so that you can look at the links that I've included. So I have a 4-minute clip from Senator Ed Markey when he did his Greentown meeting, the Green New Deal. And I gave to him a document that talks about planning for a sustainable future with technology connections. And Ed Markey confirmed that 2 decades ago, he knew that wireless radio frequency radiation causes, or was a co-carcinogen at the time. And the study that I brought to his attention is a $30 million study that our own government, the U.S. National Toxicology Program, has now completed. They are the world's leading experts in toxic research, and they determined wireless radiation from cell towers, small cells, smart meters, and our own personal devices shows clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage. Now, clear evidence is the highest of 5 categories that the world's leading toxics researchers can assign. So that should have been a red flag for all of us. But the reason why we don't hear very much about these important studies when they come out is if you were to watch an hour of prime time, count how many telecom ads or Comcast ads that we hear, and those are the gatekeepers that control the messaging that we receive. But fortunately, there are thousands of studies all over the world documenting very, very serious harm. And in fact, Senator Markey in 2012 asked the Government Accountability Office in Washington, D.C. to do something about this issue. And they asked the FCC to open up a public docket into which, over the next 6 years, thousands of pages of scientific evidence were submitted to the FCC, and they completely ignored the science. In fact, at the end of 2019, they filed their determination with the Federal Registry, the Federal Register, and said, no, we don't really need to change our public radiation exposure limits. So when that determination was filed, the lawsuits began. Children's Health Trust, or Environmental Health Trust, and Children's Health Defense, as well as other parties across the U.S., were combined into one lawsuit that went before the Ninth Circuit Court in Washington, D.C. The judges were presented with 11,000 pages of scientific, medical, and citizen as evidence of harm from today's wireless radio frequency radiation exposures. And at the end of the hearing, the court found the FCC guilty. They found that they ignored the evidence for the long-term effects, because right now the only guidelines that the FCC provides is how much heat would it take from a device in about 6 minutes or 30 minutes to raise the temperature of the skin. And what the science is showing is that, granted, heat is bad, but you don't have to have heat to have biological effects such as cancers, DNA damage, infertility, autism, Alzheimer's, ADD, ADHD. Insomnia is a big one that a lot of people are struggling with right now, as well as anxiety, depression, earlier and earlier onset Alzheimer's. And this is all very heavily documented in the scientific literature as being caused by not just correlation, but causation from today's radio frequency exposures. So,
Ms. Doucette,
yeah.
this is Chair Berube. I'll give you another minute, please.
Okay. So what I wanted to also draw to your attention is that we have not been getting the protections at the federal level that we need. Thankfully, New Hampshire passed a law to form a commission. They investigated for an entire year, even during the pandemic, and they came out with this groundbreaking report that documents the conflicts of interest with our federal agencies and the wireless industry. And then they make 15 recommendations to steer away from further wireless build out. And instead, our town should be investing in fiber optics or high-speed cable to and through the premises, where we can simply hook up indoors through Ethernet cables and adapters. So we don't need to meet the industry's claim of capacity demand if we use safe hardwired technology to the premises and then just hook up to our own devices indoors. And before I go, I know this comes out of left field for most people, so I want to give you a demonstration of what this radiation looks like. So there is now professional medical training for 24.5 CME and CE credits. At the medical conference, they recommended this radio frequency detection meter. You can see in my home, knowing what I know, I'm having a wonderful experience with you tonight on Zoom through a hardwired connection. There's no radio frequency in my home. Watch what happens though when I take my cell phone out of airplane mode and I begin connecting cellular data, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, locator, hotspot. It's now at the extreme flashing red. In the scientific literature, they want us to be at 10 or less, and the unit of measurement is a microwatt per square meter. In my home, before I turned on my phone, which I'm going to put back in airplane mode, we were at like 4 microwatts. Just turning my phone on, we are at 2.5 million microwatts per square meter. And in the science, they want us to be at 10 or less in our indoor environments. So you and I can study this. You and I can turn off our devices or choose to use airplane mode or just run an Ethernet cable to an adapter. But when we allow cell towers or 5G small cells in at close range, we no longer have a choice.
Ms.
Or
Doucette.
when we put a utility smart meter on our homes.
Ms. Doucette, please wrap up.
We can't. Okay. So my ask of you tonight is to continue with this warrant article petition. Out in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, Verizon turned a cell tower on top of a neighborhood. the people, the children, the adults, the pets got so sick they've had to abandon their homes. And for the first time in the U.S., their Board of Health did the
Okay.
investigation.
Ms. Doucette, thank you very much. And I apologize for cutting you off, but I just need to keep it to, I think you're starting to introduce new information in your presentation, but it's information we have in terms of what's going on in Pittsfield, because the petitioner has provided us, a lot of information.
Yeah.
So
in
is there
closing, if I
anybody-
could just
No, thank-
offer,
No, thank
Maureen
you.
Barnes sent in
No,
a
Ms.
statement.
Doucette.
Yeah.
Ms. Doucette, thank you very much. We're gonna move on,
Okay.
in the sense that I'd like to hear from others in the room,
Someone
or,
else on Zoom.
Somebody else over here.
okay. And Deirdre, can you help us out? I can't see the screen of whose hand is raised on Zoom.
Jonathan something.
So if you're on Zoom and you have your hand raised, I see a gentleman, looks like he's bearded and in a blue shirt. If you would unmute your mic, the floor is yours.
Yep.
And please.
That's me, bearded in the blue shirt. You're talking to me, I think.
Okay, would you let
Thanks
us
so
know
much.
your name and your address, or who you're affiliated
so
with?
It's Jonathan Mirren, 224 Avery Brook Road in Charlemont, Massachusetts.
Okay, I'll give you a few minutes.
Great. I think I can do it under 2. So I'm the director of a group out here in Western Mass called Hilltown Health. We work with town officials, elected officials like yourselves, to help strengthen local telecom bylaws in the face of quite a number of cell tower applications where the planning board feels kind of hamstrung, doesn't quite know what to do, and looking at the science that Ms. Doucette just presented, and then looking at their town bylaws, which are often sort of insufficient to provide, any real measure of protection because the setback is too small, et cetera. So I'm also coming at it from a personal angle. My wife became what's described as electrohypersensitive or electrically sensitive in 2010. We did make a documentary which has gotten some attention, which I'm happy to provide for free to everyone, called Canary in a Gold Mine, about her experience and our family's experience of what it's like when someone that you love is injured by this exposure. But just in terms of this particular Warren article before you, I did have the chance to go to Pittsfield and speak in favor of the Pittsfield elected officials sending this on to their elected officials when that did pass. And one of the high points of this particular action is that it's free, and also that I don't know what the cell tower applications are like in your town, but essentially if everyone in your town was fully aware and understood the science about this exposure, and then was sort of talking to the planning board or whoever makes these decisions about yes or no to this or that installation of, say, a 5G small cell antenna close to a child's home, close to a child's bedroom, they'd see that you're sort of between a rock and a hard place. Taking a little proactive position and letting your elected officials, the people who on the state and federal level, know that you are concerned about this, that is a great thing. And it seems to me like just a basic thing, like the FCC has been asked by a federal court to do their job, and they're not doing it. So we basically need Congress and people at the federal level to intervene. It's tough for elected officials or from Millis or me or Ms. Doucette to do anything to make the FCC move forward. We really need to pressure our elected officials to make an intervention. So I strongly support this warrant. Patricia Burke has been a tireless advocate for public health for years and years and years around Massachusetts. And this is, as you know, her hometown. She's worked so hard in Worcester and other places to make places safer. And you're really very lucky to have her. And she's lucky to have you. So I hope you do the right thing. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I move to halt any further discussion and move to vote.
So I'm not sure what the official motion is. I think it's move the question.
Move the question.
And we need a second?
Second.
Okay. So we will wrap up discussion. And Deirdre, are you ready to take, we'll do a roll call vote? Actually, we'll just take a regular vote. All those in favor of recommending dismissal, say aye.
Aye.
All those voting nay, say nay. Nay. Any abstentions? So Deirdre, I voted nay for dismissal, and the rest of the committee voted yay to recommend dismissal.
Right, so it's voted to dismiss, correct?
Recommend dismissal.
Correct, that's what I have, okay.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we're on petitioned articles. There is another petitioned article that we just heard. Actually, I'm sorry, it's not a petitioned article. The other article that's the only petitioned article.
Yep.
Okay. So moving on with our agenda. Stabilization Fund Policy Review and Discussion. So, Marie, I think you're best suited to go through this. Would you lead us, please?
Sure. So, we've been tracking our stabilization funds as long as I've been on the committee. Different times we've dipped below 5%, but over the past several years, we've made a highly concerted effort to stay above 5%. Of course, as our budget increases, that 5% number also increases. And as our investments, fluctuate up and down, that fund also fluctuates a little bit. Right now, I think, if I remember correctly, we're about $10,000 away from being at 5%, so I would call that a statistical error. That's not significant with a balance of $2.1 million. So, we all have the stabilization fund here. Our policy, one of the reasons why we want to have it over 5% is for bonding, and it affects the interest rate at which we can borrow. It is a way that the bonding agencies and other funding agencies look at the fiscal management of the town, I won't say responsibility, but how well we're managing our town's budgets and finances. So we have dipped into stabilization at different times, and when we do fall below 5%, our policy that was voted on before my time, not before Craig's time, but before my time, that we need to develop a funding schedule to get back to 5% within 3 years or less. So that is the policy that has been set for years, and we have held, tightly to that as far as I know, as far as my memory goes. So that's kind of the general policy.
Okay. Any questions or further discussion points from the committee or from the audience? So the reason that it's important that we understand this is because this is part of a DIP or a allocation of stabilization funds to fund the general fund and fund the budget this year is proposed. There is data that I have that I will be sharing that shows that this, the frequency and the magnitude of which this has been done. It's not precedent setting, and I didn't bring the data with me tonight, but I will share that with you. It will be in your meeting packets for next week. We will vote the budget next week. I don't plan to take a vote on operating budget and the various articles that are affected by that tonight. So, we certainly can discuss to our heart's content or until we fall asleep, all of those things, but we won't vote until next week, and we'll have more discussion next week, is my intent. Okay? Okay. So moving on from stabilization fund, we're going to go to town meeting article discussion, and while we're doing that, so I'll invite Mr. Kaczynski up. and we'll go over the warrant. We will also do notional or potential article assignments for the actual town meeting. So depending on how votes go, there could be some changes, as most of you are familiar with. These would be our initial assignments. So, Mr. Gazinski, if you would lead us through the warrant, which has changed slightly.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So proceeding through the warrant, Article 1 does list the unpaid bills that we're putting forward for payment at the annual town meeting. I don't know if there are any questions in regards, it's a rather small number, but I didn't know if there's any questions in regards to those. Most of the time, these bills, they simply come in late, too late in order to pay within the fiscal year. So if they come in after July 15th, and for any reason these funds weren't encumbered, they don't get paid until we have a subsequent article to authorize that.
And your recommendation is that your input is that we are ready to vote Article 1?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
I move that we recommend approval of Article 1 in the amount of $8,235.59, of which $1,611.11 would come from free cash, $6,553.27 would come from water, and $71.21 would come from sewer.
Second.
And before discussion, my question is, Jody has been proactive and done those funding source tabulations. I just want to make sure that we have agreement.
I trust Jody.
Carol, do you know that? And that's, your track, I'm just double checking us to make sure. Okay, so.
I look at her, if she gives me the stink eye, then I know I'm off by a number.
Please help us continue to help us out that way, okay? So moved, seconded, discussion. None heard? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, so before you go on, unpaid bills, do I have a volunteer to take that article? Any other volunteers? Joyce. So Joyce has Article 1. Okay. Article 2.
Yes, Mr. Chair, just to jump ahead a little bit, just let you know, Articles 2, 3, and 4, I would recommend not taking any final votes this evening. As you had mentioned, these are financial articles, and there may be some other pieces of information that may come to light between now and next week that would be helpful for the committee. Article 2, just for everyone watching at home, is for to make transfers within this current fiscal year 2023, to the current operating budget to make sure that the budgets are properly balanced as we wrap up our fiscal year. So do anticipate we'll have a full breakdown of those transfers for you prior to your meeting next Wednesday.
Okay, so we won't vote Article 2.
3 or 4.
Right, but I would like to take a volunteer for Article 2.
I'll take that. I'd take that or John.
You guys can arm wrestle if you want. I just want to make sure everybody's.
It's a John fight.
Yeah, it is. John was first.
Fan duel.
I think that means something different.
Oh, uh-oh. No Title IX?
All right, I have John Lohr. Okay. Article 3 is the operating budget. I will take that one, as is customary for the chair to take the operating budget. I would like to discuss it, though, so if you would please go over the most current proposal as voted by the Select Board on Monday.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you did receive some budget information prior to the meeting. You did receive, and I'm sure you'll get to it, information regarding capital, marijuana funding, And the Select Board did vote to recommend a budget at their meeting this past Monday. The budget does contemplate first of all, meeting all the requirements of our fixed costs, such as insurance, retirement, debt, as well as recommending a 6% increase to the municipal departmental budgets as well as the school department. And also, that's it for this article. I don't know if you have specifics you want to talk about, if there's any specific areas.
Will you synopsize the proposal in general, even though it may be covered in
Sure, there's other
portions?
articles, yes, it does go into the other articles, so in addition to Article 3, it does carry over to Article 4 as part of the budget proposal. There would be a proposal for supplemental budget for the school department in the amount of $538,697 in free cash and $400,000 from the stabilization fund, for a total supplemental budget of $938,697. So again, I believe it's the intention of the board that this is a one-time supplemental budget funding in order to really minimize the layoffs at the school, and we are working with our state legislators to see if there's any supplemental funding from the state that can be made available. Unfortunately, we won't know the answers to those questions until after the town meeting. So I know Selectman Schultz is here this evening. He volunteered to come in if there's specific questions on the budget. And the finance director's here as well, if there's any detailed questions on that.
Questions from the committee or discussion items?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Delore.
Just a quick question regarding state funding. Do we have an idea when that date is earmarked, or is it when the state comes around?
It's when the state finalizes its budget.
Okay.
So even if there are additional funds put forward to assist with special education funding, I know there's some funds put forward by the governor in a supplemental budget package, but until that is fully debated and approved by the legislature and signed by the governor, which usually doesn't happen until the end of June or in July, we have no guarantee of those funds. Those funds are basically just a budget process, and the state's budget process usually ends about 2 months after our budget process ends.
Thank you. Ms. Boyardi?
Do we happen to know how many teachers are being affected by this?
I can't provide any further information beyond what the school provided to you the other evening. I would defer to school officials.
Mr. Conroy, can you comment on that? I think I know the answer. I think you're the best person in the room to comment on that.
Mark Conroy, School Committee. I think, again, it was in what we proposed last week. I think if the proposal was 1.4, which this is about 1.3, a little less. 1.4, it was 7 FTEs. I think at, going off memory, the mid-range was about
14.
15, and with 0, it is 27 and a half.
So this is the 7.
Yeah, it might be, give or take, just, again, because this is 1.3, not 1.4, so in that range.
Okay, 7.5. No, thank you.
Mr.
Mr.
Chair,
Underhill?
I have two questions. One for clarity purpose. So we're transferring 530, this is proposing to transfer 538,697 from free cash. So the remaining 624,983 and change, is that marijuana impact funds? Why are those funds not being made available before we dip into stabilization fund?
They are.
Yeah.
Mr. Schultz.
Okay, I can go through this, I think. There's about $1.3 million gap. We're trying to-
Identify yourself,
Oh, I'm
please.
sorry, Craig Schultz, Select Board, 330 Plain Street. There is about 1.3 million that we're trying to find, $1,353,000 exactly. That's the gap. By moving the budget to 6%, that provided $363,000 of funds. HCA, and that's marijuana impact money, and that can only be used for items where there is some type of a nexus to marijuana. 95-ish is used for the school resource officer, some goes to the library, and the school resource officer is a police officer that is stationed in the school. It's not a school staff member. So that money is all accounted for. $51,000 is going to the schools to meet their budget needs. Free cash of $538,197 is the available free cash we have left. And that's after we fund most of the items that were on the, and I'm sure Mike will get to those as we move through it, on the capital planning list. We were able to use some other sources to cover almost all of those items that were proposed, which left us about $400,000 short, and that's where we proposed stabilization. And so the stabilization funds will be used for $400,000 to close the gap, moving us to $1,384,000 and change. The $938,000 of that is a one-time fix. We know that's not recurring. The school knows that's recurring. Finance committee, it's not recurring. It's not going to be asked again by the school, and the select board has already said we're not funding that again. The 6% that goes in their base, next year if we revert back to the 4% formula, that 6% is in there, but it'll be 4% on top of that. Same thing with the town. The 6% is a one-year jump, and it's hard not to do a one-year jump when you're sitting on $1.5 million of new growth. So it's achievable this year. I wouldn't stick with it every year, but 4% a year is the ideal, but our new growth has been astronomical. We based 4% on $600,000 to $700,000 of new growth every year. It's been double that. So we could do this one year, and that's what we're doing this year. That puts us at a number that everybody agrees gets us to 7.5 layoffs at the school, full-time equivalencies. That means it could be one teacher or it could be two teachers that are cut to half-time each, but 7.5 full-time equivalencies. And I'm not going to speak to who they are because I have no idea. But when we say FTEs, I want to make people understand that doesn't mean in every case that it's a one-for-one. It could be positions being cut in half or several positions being cut by 25%. But it will have an impact, absolutely. So that was our plan. That's what we proposed. Does that answer the question as far as that goes, pretty much?
Do you mind if I just ask one follow-up?
Yeah.
It did answer the question. Thank you. So on borrowing the money from the stabilization fund, the $400,000, we have 3 years by our policy to pay that back.
Yes.
Is it the select board's intention to put $133,000, which a bunch of threes afterwards, a year away? What's the intention to pay this back?
The intentions are multifold. The first is if the state should come through, the school committee, this was said last night, so there's nothing new, I'm just repeating what I said on Monday. If this money comes through from the state, suppose they give us $200,000. That $200,000 would not be an additional $200,000 on top of the $1,384,000 we gave the schools. That would be the first $200,000 as soon as we mechanically can to put it back into stabilization. Stabilization gets paid back first. After that, it would be as quickly as possible. I wouldn't stretch it for the 3 years. I would try to do it as absolutely quickly as we could, with any state money being the first dollars in. Now, that doesn't mean that in July we get money from the state because they finally vote their budget, because we have to appropriate, we have to go through all of this, but by November we should probably be able to put it back in.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Crum?
A couple of things. So let's say we don't know what state money is coming to the school committee.
Right.
But we're authorizing, potentially, we're authorizing this money to come out of stabilization and free cash. But let's say that extra funding comes from the state. What happens to this money?
This money, as I said, any state money would be used to pay back stabilization first. So I don't think anybody in this room is anticipating more than $400,000, but if they came through with $1.3 million, there'd be an interesting discussion to be had about what we do with that money. Because our goal was to solve a $1.3 million problem. We thought that we could hope for a few $100,000 from the state, And we anticipate that's the first money back into stabilization if it does come in.
I have a question for Ms. Johnston, if I may, that is along the lines of Mr. Cron's question, and that is the mechanics of the transfer out of stabilization. Does that happen as it's needed, or does that happen as soon as the appropriation is voted?
It's a good question.
So in this case, the way that the article is written, it would be held as a separate article. So the intent would be that the school would have to draw down their current budget, and once the current budget, the '24 budget, was depleted in the special education area, they could draw off of that article.
So potentially it wouldn't happen until the end of fiscal year '24?
Right.
In which
Right.
case, that increases the likelihood that there would be some state aid along the way.
Well-
That's my question. I'm not sure if it
No,
also answers your question.
But you brought up a new one, and that is...
Thank you.
The school department doesn't have to spend their budget based on expenses or salary. They could spend it pretty much any way they like. So that would not stop the schools from spending all of the money and coming down to the end, but not necessarily needing all of that money, but coming down to the end and saying, now I need that $1.5 million because we spent all of the money that we had in the budget. Not necessarily to pay for, let's say, the special needs or special education, which may have been funded by additional state money. So it leaves a big door open if we're waiting till the end of the year to see if they've spent their budget. They could have spent their budget on a variety of different things that aren't necessarily included in the budget that we're presenting.
Right, but I think the intent of the town in this article is that the whole issue is the increase in special education expenses. So there shouldn't be any monies used for anything in this article unless it's specifically for special education that's over and above what they currently have in their budget for special education.
So I think we need to specialize and really then come down and define this in that way. Because otherwise, we got an extra $1.5 million at the end of the year if we overspend what we currently have. So yes, if it's defined just for that, and that is for special needs education that is above and beyond what they had budgeted in this particular year, whatever, then yes, then that makes sense. But I would not want to see it left wide open.
Yeah, may I make a comment?
Mr. Schultz?
I think the motion that's going to be drafted is going to specify that any money from the state to offset this problem goes back to pay back the town, especially the stabilization fund. But we hadn't anticipated the other $500,000. And I don't think there's anybody in any part of this state that thinks that there's going to be enough money for the school to frivolously hire 5 more teachers and other curriculum materials. I think that right now, we're struggling to meet the bare minimum. But I think that, I know that when my proposal was to draft the motion that I made at that last night's meeting was that the money that comes in from the state is paid back to stabilization first. And all the money flows through Carroll. The school doesn't get a bag of money from anybody. It goes through Carroll. Carroll transfers it out and moves it around.
Let me just say, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that they would spend it frivolously, but budgets get spent. Second question is...
In this case, monies that would be coming in from the state would be maybe additional circuit breaker. So that's a separate fund altogether. So any amount of money that would be, they would try to expend from this article, the special article, it would, we see all the money coming in. So we would automatically make it that they would have to spend out of their circuit breaker, if that's where the additional funding's coming in.
Mr. Kaczynski, when we received all of the budgets until tonight, tell me if my recollection is wrong, the town had a 4% increase over last year. Is that correct?
That's incorrect.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the 6% was put in there back when the select board had their workshop budget meeting. I can't remember the exact date of that.
22nd of March.
22nd of March.
Okay, but we had looked at budgets before then, so that was increased at that time.
Right.
So we had looked at a lot of budgets that were 4% until March 22nd. Okay, so this is the first we know of that then.
Well, as of March 22nd, that was the first time that the selectmen reviewed that. and
Right, but that's the first time we're hearing of it, right?
No.
No?
No.
I think it was addressed last week, definitely.
I know I mentioned it last time I was here.
This is not the first time I hear 6%.
Yeah.
We've had meetings where, I'm not sure if we had quorum, where we posted select board FinCom meetings at select board meetings, but maybe not have achieved quorum where that has been discussed. So the meeting wasn't convened. I know that I've heard 6% prior to tonight. I'm not surprised by it. Additionally, the 4% formula has only been in use for maybe the last 2 years. We used to use an entirely different construct, 65-35 split. So.
And I think that, and I haven't seen what you've seen, but most of our budgets were showing requested amounts, not recommended amounts. The recommended amounts are what we put together back on the 22nd.
The first recommended amount was March 22nd.
Yeah, and the requested amounts were far in excess of 4 and far in excess of 6, and I think bordering on.
I mean, I can
twice
say
that.
I can't speak for the school budget. I can say on the municipal budgets that Carol and I went through those, and we cut over $200,000 out of those budget requests on the municipal side to get down to that level.
200,000 of requests to get to 6%, not of.
Right, not of current budget.
Yeah.
Of requests.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Ms. McGinnis.
are you done, Mr. Underhill?
Oh,
Okay,
I've
fine.
been done. Thank you.
I'm just curious that, someone's got to say it, Mr. Chair, that we were assured a few years ago that 4% would be it. I count only 1 year, if that, where the 4%. I don't understand why the school has an issue, but why the town can't fit within the 4%, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Schultz, would you care to address it?
There is, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, some of that, there's about 50, 60,000 going to the DPW for the enterprise fund.
Yeah,
And correct
there
me
are a
on the
number
amount.
of factors that
Yeah.
go into that. So for every percent that the town receives an increase, that's roughly about $90,000. So of that 2%, we're talking about $180,000. So approximately 50 to 60,000 of that is work towards the process of balancing the enterprise and general fund amounts in the DPW. It's been a project we've been working on for some time. And I think at this time, 15,000 of that under the select board's proposal is going towards additional staff hours at the Council on Aging, which they have been asking for, I believe, 10 years, and it's been very difficult to provide that. The balance, which is about
105.
Yeah, about 100, a little over 100,000, is really going towards addressing the tremendous spike in inflation. On the municipal side, our budgets are much heavier on the expense side than the salary side as compared to the schools. So for those that have been paying attention to the inflation and the increases, it's been very difficult for us with the stresses of the increase in our senior population and other inflationary problems for us to meet that 4%. So that is a lot of it. We did just finalize most of our contracts, and part of that process was trying to be competitive, and we did hold a tight line on those contracts, but there are costs into that. So that's really of that 180,000, that's pretty much the breakdown of that.
One of the largest increases for the municipal budget is in the employee benefits section. If it's $600, almost $700,000, which is a 10.9% increase over last year. We also had an increase in general insurance, which is 15%. So it doesn't take long to get up to that 105,000 that the municipal side needed.
And just a moment, a comment on the Council on Aging staff position ad. We're going to be recruiting a new Council on Aging director. I think everybody knows that Patty's leaving us after many, many years. And we were trying to make that a little bit more attractive to try to find somebody in the job market right now. It's not that if you ask enough, you eventually get something. We've held the line on a lot of that. But this case, we're going to be going out to hire, and we thought that we should set the salary at least at a full-time equivalency or very close to a full-time equivalency. And it was short dollars to do
You're
that.
still below, even with this proposal, if I remember right, you're still below 40 hours a week? You're
I
like
think so, but it's
39 and
creeping
change.
up. It gets us close enough that we thought we could help. with the recruiting process.
Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering if the town is taking into consideration the added costs that the town absorbs for school employees, the town portion of the health insurance and other benefits. Is that ever calculated within the school budget?
No, it is not.
Not
Is
yet.
that-
It's not
is that
calculated
standard?
as presented to town meeting. It is calculated on our Schedule 19 reports to the
Right.
state, but it's not presented to town meeting as part of their budget, because neither is it within the general municipal departments. It's overall health insurance for the whole, all the town and school employees.
Might behoove us, Mr. Chair, that I had asked for one of those to just find out what the extra benefits are, to see what exactly each department is costing, including the schools. Thank you.
I'm curious along the lines of Kathy's question are those benefits negotiated separately? Are the benefits that are common in general to the town, are they each negotiated and then, aggregated at the time of the cost? Are they negotiated separately but paid for collectively?
I'll try to answer the question this way. The vast majority of those costs are fixed. There's really little the town can do. On the municipal side, we have Norfolk County Retirement, which I think the finance director just pointed went up quite a bit. We really have no say on that. We can't tweak that. That's not something that's negotiated. On the health insurance, we negotiated a number of years ago to go in, before I started here, to go into the GIC. So the costs as part of that are regulated by the Commonwealth. Short of us jumping out of the GIC and going to a separate private insurer, there's really not much we can do on that end. We have investigated that. We did investigate that this past year and found that it wasn't going to be financially advantageous to the town to do that because of just the way the market was. Those are the main cost drivers in the benefits. I don't know if there's any others I'm missing that you want to touch upon.
Those are the two largest contributors to employee benefits. Just want everybody to realize that the town does not pay for the teacher's retirement fund, that the state pays for that.
Is it safe to say that pooling health insurance, there's an economy of scale to be achieved by having all of the school and DPW employees negotiated together?
Well, they are.
Or contracted for?
It's one, the GIC
My
is
point is,
for
it would
the
be
whole
more
town.
expensive if they were separate.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
And isn't the GIC a bundling of several
Well, it's
communities?
a bundling of all the state employees, as well as about 40 municipalities in the Commonwealth.
Joyce?
And I guess my question is, as far as family plan versus single plan, and how is that, do we have to offer family plan?
Yes.
So it isn't, you can
You
get
can't
an...
discriminate to any of the employees
No,
about
but
the
can you give
benefits.
incentive for them to be able to take, if, say, a spouse has insurance, is there any way of
Yes,
doing an...
we have had some discussions about that, and it's something we're going to be looking into,
Oh.
to develop a program and we will be sitting down with our public employee committee to discuss the possibility of offering a program, an opt-out program, where they could receive a stipend from the town, which is much less than the cost of health insurance.
Right.
Should they be able to get health insurance through their spouse.
Okay.
But under state law, we're required to provide health insurance.
No, I understood that, I just didn't, about the
Mr. Chair.
opting.
Mr. Crowe?
Is the percentage of contribution that the town makes toward the health insurance, is that built into the contracts of the employees?
Yes, it is. It's fixed by contract. And right now, for most employees, it's, the employee picks up 30% and the town picks up 70%. Under state law, the range is from 50% to 90%. But the amount that's actually shared is based on collective bargaining between the town and its various unions.
That's actually kind of what I'm getting at, is that negotiated separately by the school, separated by SEIU, firemen, et cetera? Are there different pay rates, share rates
No, the share rates are pretty much the same. There are a few employees that are grandfathered from 20-plus years ago, but aside from that, the different share rates on the payments are the same across the board. If we were to make a change there, it would probably have to be something that we tried to work out across the board. Would not be an easy thing to accomplish from a negotiating standpoint, but it theoretically could happen if all the unions came on board with it.
Ms. Boyerty?
Thank you. As far as retirement, when they retire, they still get they can still get insurance through the town?
That's correct. So until they reach 65, they can stay on the active plans. If they meet the minimum state requirements, which I think is 10 years vested, and then once they reach 65, they're required to go over to the Medicare supplement
So
plans.
it isn't once they're 65, that's it?
Well, no, they still get offered at Medicare supplement plans, but that's at, retirees pay 50%. So it's different. They don't pay 30%, they pay 50%.
And once again, are you in the conversations of doing some kind of incentive so that they
It's something that's much,
more complicated?
well, it's just much less likely to get people to come on once they're
Okay.
retired, but certainly for the active employees, it's something that has worked in a number of communities.
Ms. Garzon?
So getting back to the mechanics issue, if we don't tap into the extra funds, if by some miracle, money comes from the state, we don't tap into stabilization, then at a future town meeting, would we just rescind that authority so that it wouldn't show that it had come out of stabilization? How does that work?
I think once you voted, we're going to have to fund the article. And then if we don't need it, at the next town meeting, we can put it back.
Okay.
Well, that was my question, and maybe I misphrased it, but my question is, why wouldn't the funds stay in stabilization until they're actually needed? We're not going to expend on July 1st all of the teachers' salaries, so why not just leave it in there?
Well, I don't want to speak for the school district, but I believe they have contracts. They have contracts in place, union contracts, that if they don't have the funding available, then they do have to have certain notification requirements to members of their collective bargaining units. And if they don't know if the state aid's coming in, and they don't know if they've got, they don't have an appropriation, then they don't have the necessary funding to meet the requirements of those contracts, thereby giving them notice during a certain amount of time. So it's really setting aside these funds.
Oh, okay, hold on. Yeah. Actually, I don't want to get off this. I want to get off of this because, one, I don't really think it changes much. It's down the road, and we can have more discussion on my question and the points of the mechanics. So please, no more comment on that. I retract my question. You've answered it sufficiently. I would like to know, so I've received a number of emails. Most of them have come from people clicking on the point of contact link on the Finance Committee and have sent me emails, urging us to vote to fully fund the school. And I mention this because I think I know there's no way that the school can be fully funded. We can cut, there are cuts to be made, and they will get deep into personnel costs across the town and the school in order to, you can't not cut your way out of this. There have to be cuts. And all along, I have faith that we will come to the least of the worst solutions, of the bad, the lesser of evils. And I think we're certainly getting close to that. Having said that, while you're still at the microphone, Mr. Schultz, I'd like to know what else was considered that made you come to this proposal, which, frankly, candidly, I'll tell you that I agree with. I don't know what else there is.
I receive the same email as you do, I'm sure. Probably the same people, probably the same words. But, and I've been upfront, we can't meet the whole need. And I've said that from the beginning. I said that there was a path that could get us to 1.3, 1.4-ish. There's no way to get to the whole amount. I've been saying that since we had our first tri-board meeting, that 1.3, 1.4 is the best I could imagine. What led us to this was we had a few caveats that we wanted to make sure. We were not going to cut town services to fund the school. We weren't going to cut into police, library, DPW, council on aging, fire. Not that the school did anything to cause this problem. This is a problem that affects the school. We need to work with the legislature to solve it, and we weren't going to go in and start pitting municipal against school to solve it. So we weren't going, and I've been upfront with the school about that too. We weren't going to cut back on any services to the town. We weren't going to be adding services. We weren't going to be adding a lot of items, but we weren't going to be cutting back. We weren't going to cut staff. We weren't going to cut services. So that was our first caveat. Secondly, we were pretty upfront that we weren't going to go into stabilization much deeper than the money we put into it in November. Now, granted, at that moment, I was operating on more money. It was only 300, I apologize. But 400's close, so we were trying to keep that at a reasonable number also. So with that, you're pretty constrained. I think Carol did a wonderful job being able to get to, and when you get a little later in the warrant, you'll see it, the capital items that are funded by going back and shaking the tree for every warrant article that had a nexus to those. So we were able to do it without even dramatically cutting the recommendation from the Capital Planning Committee. So we're able to do a lot with what we have. And as I've said in the letters I've responded to, and as I've said to the school committee, and I've said at Select Board, and I'm saying here, and the Select Board has agreed to this every time we've talked about it, so it's nothing out of school. This is a one-year fix. This can't be done again, and that's something you have to hold us to. I mean, and that's what we have to hold the school to.
You told us to hold you to that last year, Mr. Vice Chair.
So if I can clarify, what was said is that the 361
No one
is
understands the way I do. Sorry.
if I could complete what I was going to say, and that is, what was said last year is that the 361 is a one-time, meaning it was not added to the operating budget.
Right.
Nobody knew that, I mean, we did know that there was a SPED problem and that likelihood that that was going to, the funding issue on SPED was going to get worse. The 361 is not a baseline figure. It was not added to the baseline last year. And that is the, I think that's being wrongly interpreted when we say, we said that this wouldn't happen again. We said that the 361 was a one-time addition to the budget, but not the baseline. And that's why we're having this discussion again, and the 361 that was given last year is part, or last fall, is part of this year's discussion.
Right. That was, when they came in for their budget, they had their budget of last year plus 4%. That's what they walked in and proposed, and said that's a $1.8 million problem. Then we'd moved it up to 6%. That coincidentally was about $360,000. But totally different years, a totally different solution. They never included that in their base. I don't think I misrepresented anything on that one. If I'd come in here and started them at $361,000 higher than last year's budget, that would have been a misrepresentation. That's not the case.
Ms. Perry?
Yeah.
When Terry Wiggins presented to the school committee, though, he had at one point plugged in $361,000. So why was that? I don't understand then.
Not knowing, I'm going to guess Terry made a mistake, because honestly, that was the number. I don't think they're including it anymore. I'll let Mark speak to it, because I wasn't there.
Yeah,
but
thank you.
He's not including it now, I'll tell you that.
Okay.
Yeah.
He had, and there was a question about it at school committee about that being plugged in.
It wasn't, what happened was, it was never included in the base budget that generated what was really a $2 million loss, $2 million shortfall. The discrepancy in where the 360 was included is in the original presentation that Superintendent Mulaney gave. When you looked at the increases, and the one being the out-of-district tuition, the number was $669,000. But that $669,000 was the increase from what we actually spent to what we were planning to spend, or what we were budgeting to spend next year. So the variances in the line items went from actual spend this year which included the 361 because that's what's being spent, to the budget next year. So it was showing the variances, and what the variance shows was actuals to budget, not the base budget to the budget, which is why I came and showed a different view of it to show, to translate, one of the slides was to translate from the budget presentation variances to the actual variances.
Thank you.
Mr. Stedman, sorry about that.
Got a couple things. One, to follow up on Mr. Crone's comments on Article 4. Wonder it would be beneficial to state in here that 938,697 is for special education. It just says now to the school department.
I personally would agree with you, and I would also make it be for out-of-district placement, because that's
Yes.
what they're
There we
saying
go.
the issue
Thank
is,
you.
I move that.
right? The
Okay.
whole issue is out-of-district placement. Over
So-
and above,
I know.
over and above their 23 budgeted line for out-of-district placement, they're saying
Right.
that they need that extra money for out-of-district placement.
Just to be clear, what Mark had said earlier, because some of that is out of district, some of that is staff that were hired in district. It all relates to
Right.
sped, but it's not all kids going out. So I
Right.
think we need to be very careful. I don't disagree with you that restrictions and parameters and guardrails need to be set, but we need to set them in a way that doesn't hamstring the intent.
I think
Yeah.
if it says special education, which could include out-of-district,
Yeah.
it might be more palatable at town meeting and likely to pass.
I don't disagree with you. I'd like to make sure we get an attorney that weighs in on it.
Right.
Just because I don't want to get all the way through it and find out we didn't do it right.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand
We
that.
leave it in your good hands to come up with the language.
Yes.
I don't come up with language. I say, Mr. Attorney. I come up with numbers.
Some detail questions, changing slightly the subject. Are the 2 additional police officers that the chief wanted in this budget? No. They are not? Okay. And I don't expect you to answer this off the top of your head, but there are several departments that the expense budget that is in what is recommended is higher than what was originally requested. For example, $35,000 in the select board
That's
budget.
marijuana funding for the social worker.
So when we originally put in the requests for our budget, we put it in as part of the base budget, and then we have a separate request for marijuana, which isn't in the original request, doesn't show up in the original request on your breakdown.
So that $35,000 additional
Those are marijuana impact funds.
For a half year.
for that.
For
Okay.
half the year. So it's actually not, it's actually the same as the current year.
Okay. You also have a $54,000 increase over and above the original requested for expenses at the schools.
That 51,000 of that is for marijuana impact funding. That's marijuana impact funding.
Marijuana as well.
Okay? Going down, the numbers get smaller, but there's
I appreciate your attention to detail, though. Yes. You're picking up all of them.
there's 2,000 in the recreation department,
That's marijuana funding?
okay? 8,250 in Oak Grove.
That's marijuana funding as well.
I thought that was kind of a one-time thing to do the trails, or is this for, what's this used for?
It was a different request this year. It's a different
But it's
request.
still within Oak Grove.
I don't have it
So
in
if you look
front
at
of
the
me.
marijuana sheet, it does break it all down, and there
Right.
you can cross-check it. Did
Right.
everyone have the marijuana impact fund
I don't
request
think we
sheet?
have the sheet with this.
It
this-
didn't
I thought those were already,
We have it, but we don't have it today.
I thought those were already in the budget requests, the original
No,
budget.
in the original budget request, they're supposed to just level service. Marijuana is a totally separate funding source.
Not
So
guaranteed
it's.
So it's a
right,
presentation,
right,
because you
right,
had that in a
exactly.
different.
Right, right.
That answers that question. Anything else that was cut that we should be aware of in your deliberations? I know the 2 police officers have been deferred.
Well, that was an above-level service request.
Right.
So outside of the
15 hours for
amount
the
of
council on
hours
aging.
for the council on aging, there's basically no above
Level service.
level service requests in the budget. Those have been
Thank you,
eliminated.
Those aren't
That
above
more than
zero.
answers my question. I appreciate that.
I do have a couple questions.
Go for it.
You know, I like to look at the proposed budget versus last year's. So I have my own spreadsheet, but it's based on your numbers here. For the Selectman Town Administrator Office, the expenses are less by $30,000, $30,500.
Right. So the funding for the marijuana impact funds, we can only fund what's available. So for the spring, it's only $271,000. The other half of that social worker will be funded in the fall with once
Okay.
the marijuana money is certified.
Okay.
Well, once free cash is certified, and the marijuana impact funds are a component of the free cash.
And it looks like with the veterans budget as well, that is less.
The veterans budget went down because the veterans officer was able to get services at the federal level for a number of the veterans. And
Nice.
so he reduced his budget. He
He's
reduced
worth
his
his money.
He's doing a good job.
Yeah, he
Great
is.
job. I think those were the two that really jumped out at me. I think when we're talking about increases in the municipal side of the budget, as you mentioned, employee benefits are a big part of that, but also fire and rescue. And that's not just straight out of our pocket. The money's there, but it has to be increased in the budget, and then we get it from the ambulance funds.
Right, so the ambulance revolving fund will fund over $600,000 this year for the firefighter, not firefighters, but for the ambulance service.
Right. We're looking at a $423,000 increase in their budget, but we
But
have
we're
the
getting
funds there to
600
backfill it.
We're getting $600,000.
Right.
To fund it. On this year, you have to remember, the SAFER grant, those four fighters are being brought on as full in October. So it's only a partial of the year that the federal government funds them until October, 75%, and then after that, they'll come on the town books. But we've increased the ambulance revenue funding to offset that.
And then it looks like, do you want to talk a little bit about debt service, of kind of where we are in terms of our debt levels for the year? In terms of trends?
It's gone down a little bit year over year. It's not going to go down substantially. We haven't brought anything on. We're not expecting to bond anything over the next, I think it's for maybe 2 years.
Okay.
So I think that what you see, in the debt schedule I sent out.
2034 is when it is the next time it will go down significantly by,
Right.
say, $500,000.
Right.
It goes down by about $100,000 every year for the next 10, unless something else gets added to it.
Well, there will be other items added to it, which is the Braun property, the $1 million, and debt service for the enterprise systems that will go on.
I'm just
because-
talking general fund, yeah.
Right. So the big thing for the general fund right now is the Braun property at $1 million. Then the ambulance and fire engine.
Okay. Those are my highlights.
Mr. Schultz, or Ms. Rosenfeld, whichever one would like to talk about this. The Select Board voted to increase the new growth number from to, I want you to comment on from and to, I just assume have the discussion now and then later, to $950,000, I believe, of new growth.
Yeah,
Can
it
you
was-
comment on that?
Yeah, it was itemized out at 841, and we have looked at many years of new growth going back, and I can find it, but it's been off by, well, last year was estimated 750, it came in at 1.5. The year before, it was about 750, and it came in at 1.3. Year before that, it was, I think, 650, and it was like 1.2-ish. Thank you. I can do this now. FY '21 came in at $1,250,000, and I believe that was estimated around 600, 650, maybe 750. 1.4 in FY '22, and that was 750. FY '23 was $1,577,000, and that was 750. So we moved it up a total of $108,000 from the estimate. and it has been off significantly more than that. It is an estimate. It's always an estimate. It depends on how the estimate's made. I usually, in my real-world job, appreciate conservative estimates, but I try to avoid conservative estimates when it's going to result in further layoffs and other things. And if we're off, it does pose an issue, but it's not more than, it's $100,000. And if there is money coming in from other sources, we can get to where we need to be, I think, safely with that. I would not be comfortable personally going over 950. That was as high as I'd go. I have a gut feeling that it might be higher, but I'm not willing to bet anything on a gut feeling here. And at work, I would probably take the position of 750 unless it was facing layoffs, just in my professional job. But knowing that I thought a higher number was achievable. I just have a very difficult time. If we came in at a 750 estimate and it came in at $1.2 million and we laid off another 3 teachers, that would be horrible optics, and that would just be a real tough place to be.
Ms. Johnston, would you comment on if that estimate is overly optimistic and the new growth actually comes in at 700 something, or say 840, and it's off by 120, whatever it is?
If we don't
How
have-
is that accounted for next year?
If we don't have sufficient additional local receipts coming in, then we would run into a problem. We'd have a deficit for next year. We did have the assessor go back out and do a up-to-date listing of what she felt was a reasonable amount, and it came in at 841. We have had a very mild winter, so a lot of projects moved forward more quickly than they would in a normal winter. So between now and the next 3 months, because the measurement date is June 30th, hopefully the additional building will continue, and then...
But there is a remedy next year. If that number comes in lower than estimated, the remedy is that at fall town meeting, an appropriation would need to be made, correct? And it would come out of
Well, you
where?
would do, if you have free cash available, you would do your free cash. But, so,
So it's not Armageddon if this number is off.
well, if chances are we'll be, have that amount, that 100,000 in additional local receipts somewhere, but as Mr. Schultz said, there's no way to go over the 950.
Yeah. I mean, and I wish I felt comfortable doing it, but I just couldn't get there. And
I understand.
Yeah.
Just want us to acknowledge that this is all part of the discussion of us knowing what we're voting for and understanding the nuances of what's being done and the second and third order effects. That's all. It's not and it's about being open and having clarity of the big picture. So that's all. I'm not trying to undermine anybody. I do see both sides of it. So, and I want to make sure everybody else does.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. McGinnis.
On that vein, I'd just like to remind everybody that the building commissioner, the DPW director, both said that, quote, building is down, and prices have dropped significantly in finishing up South End, I was told by the assessor. She's the expert. She's our eyes on the field and well-educated in this matter. The citizens pay our assessor to give us an accurate and firm amount as of June 30th. The town will learn in August if the amount is more, but until then, I feel comfortable with her 841, in which she said she even stretched.
While you're up there, Mr. Schultz, thank you.
Oh, I thought there was a question.
There is a question.
Oh.
And the question is, there was another point discussed at the select board meeting on Monday night, in the sense that I think after all was, at the end, there was still $15,000 to be found. And I believe it was for the hours for the Council on Aging. And I believe the proposed source for those hours was reducing the adjustment that was going to be made from the general fund to the enterprise funds for indirect costs. In other words, we've been making adjustments, and balancing those indirect costs for several years to bring it within an acceptable margin of error. And at the end, you know, there wasn't an obvious choice. There wasn't another 15,000 to be taken from new growth. And what was proposed was only adjusting the indirect funds, the fund balancing by 50,000 instead of 65,000. Is that in fact what is proposed? And
I left it with Mike, is that what you, that's what you did? That's,
Yeah,
I was just
well-
making sure you did come up with some tricky solution there.
So-
But when I started on the committee, we were $350,000 out of balance. At this point, we're going to be,
We estimate, I think it was going to be around 100,000. And we were trying to get down, the goal was to get down to balance it this coming year.
is that 100,000 after the 50, or?
You know, I don't have the exact
Yeah.
number in front of me, but it was hoped to get it down to zero or within margin of
acceptable
error.
margin of error is
Right,
the term
because
we've been
You
using.
cannot predict it to the dollar.
I understand.
Every
We'll
year
be
is
up
a
and
little
down,
different.
we should be up and down every 3
Yes.
years.
So it will not be fully properly adjusted based on this budget in FY '24. And again, I was reading that as a lot of the other budgetary pressures we're facing.
And so we are 2 to 3 years into that cycle of bringing it into balance within the acceptable margin of error?
Four.
Well, 2 years from the report
Right.
that we had from
And the-
Community
This would be the
Paradigm.
2020
And
was the report.
and as I remember, the Paradigm report recommended we do that within 5 to 7 or 3 to 5 years?
I think they recommended 3 to 5. and
3 to
I think
5.
the board set a goal of 3.
Our goal was
And-
3.
And so we were trying to do it in less than 3 from the time of the report. And so it looks like it's going to be in the 3.5 year mark, depending upon where we're at this time next year.
Okay.
So it's certainly not something we're forgetting about. It's front and center. It was part of the goals to reach, to make that balance. And it continues to be. But again, adjustments were made in order to make this budget work.
So to your point, we did reach out to the DPW director to ask him where he wanted us to make the $15,000 cut. He said he would leave it up to myself and the town administrator. The line that we took it from was overtime. We did not take it from the base salary
Okay,
lines.
all right, so that's a big difference.
Mr. Chair, was there any overtime taken away from other departments? Police and fire?
Yes, police and fire both had their significant cuts to their overtime.
Okay, thank you. Also, Mr. Chair, through you, could I ask the finance director what debt services the enterprise users will be facing with the PFAS plant coming online, wells 1 and 2?
Can we, can I ask you just to defer that till we get to the enterprise, unless there's a tie-in to the operating budget? Article 3.
Well, I think that what's
if
going
you-
on, no,
if-
let me just explain, Mr. Chair, that you said it was, I forget the word you used, but people are forgetting that the enterprise funds are paying for separate water and sewer services and debt that the town is not going to be taking on. So I will talk next week about whenever but you have to consider how much can the ratepayers pay? You're saying that it's, it's not all the expenses I see that you want to buy, they're all enterprise funds that are buying things.
I want to buy them?
No, that
Oh,
the
sorry.
town is proposing.
say that.
And I think we're neglecting there's been no consideration for Charles River increase. I know there's someone here that goes to every meeting, they're doing a revamp, that's going to affect the sewer users. Am I the only one that's taking into account the costs that the ratepayers are paying to support?
Well, if that's
May I?
an enterprise, no.
Okay.
If that
No.
is an enterprise fund issue, why would we be discussing it during the general fund operating budget? We can discuss it all you want, but.
No, Mr. Chair, you set the agenda,
Okay.
you
All
stop
right.
and go.
Anybody
so-
else have anything to comment on Article 3, operating budget?
Oh, can I just make a comment? I get this thing from the, and I want to say since 2018, I checked my notes, I've been speaking with the town administrator about the buyouts. Now, $438 would be normally what the town would pay for insurance. The state gives you $100 a month if you opt out of it. That's a significant increase that should be looked at sooner rather than later. Every year, we're looking into it. This could save hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I recommend that the town administrator take it for an action.
And
report back.
also, while we're at it, checking old notes, last year, the fire chief mentioned that a study was being done about regionalization of dispatch, and that was in 2022. I'm wondering, through the chair, if Mr. Kaczynski knows any results or could share that study to see, because I noticed Norwood, Braintree, everybody, they're all going to regionalization, and that should be front and center. A lot of them. Sorry, Jody, not all of them.
Mr. Kaczynski, please. Yeah.
It is something we're looking at. I've had it with the chiefs. I've actually taken a tour of a few of the different regional dispatch centers, and it's something we're looking at. I have been working with the chiefs separately to look at the details of what that would entail, and it's certainly something that you could see on the horizon within the next year to 2 years as coming
Make it the next
before the
year.
committee.
And also get a group together to regionalize police, fire, and the DPW, seeing as all the mutual aids that go on. Thank you. Next.
Okay, so anything on Article 3 before I move on? Anything else? Nothing heard. Article 4.
I think, Mr. Chairman,
That you
the committee's been
deferred that.
discussing that. I don't know if there's anything else that any other questions you had for the finance director?
No,
or
but please
myself,
just
or-
note that the guardrails are important to us. I think, in general, I've heard comments for them. I don't think we need to take a vote. I haven't heard anybody speak against it, and so we would like there to be appropriate language in the motion, in the article, that gives us comfort that the money that's being used to bridge the gap will bridge the special ed gap. Mr. Duffy. He's already up.
Jim Duffy, 343 Exchange. Is there any merit to splitting these two sums into different articles? I heard about, accounting and funds, and I just don't know if there's any merit.
Mr. Duffy, I think that's a question for the select board.
Yeah, fine.
They are here, and they hear you, and they will not discuss it tonight, but
Yeah, I don't know. Is there any merits to having two separate?
I will carry back that message to the board.
Mr. Kaczynski.
Well, one's
Mr. Schultz.
One's a
I will make
majority and
one
one's a two.
comment. We are having a meeting Monday night to discuss, and we're taking comments, so bring that up then.
The reason that, and not to be flip, but the reason that I don't want to discuss it here is because we discussed the warrant that's provided to us. We don't draft the warrant. It's not in our authority or responsibility to do such. Okay? All right. Ms. Garzon, thank you.
Ms. Johnston could give us the free cash breakdown like you have in prior town meetings of, how much is free cash and how much are we allocating per this warrant? And kind of like for which articles and for what, especially in light of this complicated spreadsheet with all of the rescission articles and funding, just to help us track, like what will actually come out of free cash for the capital items. That would be helpful.
I'll send you it.
That'd be great.
Can you have that to us this week?
If I get the computer back on, I can send it to you tonight.
I don't want it to. By Friday would be great. All right, Article 5.
Mr. Chairman, Article 5, under state law, municipal collective bargaining agreements need to be formally ratified at a town meeting by the legislative body. So this isn't so much an actual budgetary article as much as it's just a ratification of those agreements, of which funding is included in the budget.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
I move that we recommend approval of Article 5 as written in the warrant.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to recommend Article 5 as recommended in the warrant. As moved. Any discussion? None heard. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. A volunteer, please,
I
for Article
volunteer.
5. Mr. Crone. Backing up 1 second, I know I'm doing a bit of a foul by backing up, but Article 3, I said I would take. Article 4, I will take.
Right.
Okay, Article, for Deirdre and for the record, Article 5, Mike Crone. Article 6.
Mr. Chairman, Articles 6, 7, and 8 are our standard enterprise fund budgetary articles. I would recommend that the Finance Committee wait until your next meeting to take any final votes on those. I think we've pretty much drilled down the numbers on that, but we just want to do another double check and make sure those are all set for you for next week.
Mr. Chair, might
Yes,
I
Ms.
ask,
McGinnis.
request for next week what the DPW director determined was the breakdown of the water, sewer, stormwater, and general fund for the salaries for the DPW staff?
Deirdre, I'll be in touch with you tomorrow to make sure that we get that request to Mr. McKay, and I'm sure he'll need a little bit of...
Okay, so who was assigned number, article number 4?
Pete Berube.
Oh, so you have 3 and 4?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And I will take a
Thank-
volunteer for Articles, for Article 6. I'll do it one at a time. Article 6, volunteer.
I'll take it, miss. I usually take them.
You know most of that.
Okay. Article 7.
I'll take that.
You guys want to arm wrestle
Kathy.
over it? John, I'm going to leave that with Kathy
Kathy,
because
that's
they're
fine.
tied very closely,
Yep.
as well as stormwater. Kathy, is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Article 9.
Mr. Chairman, Article 9 is our consent article. There are a number of items in this. The first being for the adoption amendments to Schedule A salary plan and Schedule C employee benefits to the Millis Personnel Plan. The second to be authorization of the Board of Health to appoint any of its members to other town offices or positions for which it has appointing authority. The number 3 is the authorization of the town's established revolving funds, which is required annually, and as well as to approve the budgets of the Community Preservation Fund.
So I'm going to interrupt you real quick. So on the personnel plan, I think it's in our packet. The changes are highlighted.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, in regards to the personnel plan, employee benefits, there are, I believe, 3 or 4 changes to that.
So there's a longevity change on page 7.
Yep, change to longevity, change to the
Accrual
sick
of
leave.
Sick leave
A change to sick leave buyback.
from 150 to 180 days.
And a change to vacation leave, insofar as how much can be carried over from one year to the next. So just to provide a little background on this, these changes really only impact the full-time employees within the personnel plan, of which there's only 3. And it basically puts it in line with the collective bargaining agreements that are related to those types of positions in general. So it just basically levels out that playing field. And again, it only affects the full-time employees, so those 3 folks.
Okay.
The other is the Schedule A chart. The Major things of note there have to do with there's a 2% increase, COLA, that was approved by the Select Board, as well as there's a number of positions that have been removed from Schedule A simply because they're not, they're either no longer, or it's been a number of years since they have been paid through that, or it's no longer relevant. So we're trying to declutter the Schedule A bit. We've combined the snow management stipend just to be a flat one category stipend. And we're trying to match some of the positions that are non-union but do essentially the same job as some union positions to try to just match those pay and wage levels. So those are pretty much the changes. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions that anyone has in regards to those changes.
I do, Mr. Chair. Just a general question. I just got this tonight. Mr. Kaczynski, does the town offer the 3 years, $5,000 a year to employees that give you a 3-year notice that they'll be leaving? Which the school, we were
We do
told the
not.
school does. You do not.
We do not.
Do you know offhand, Mr. Kuzinski, I would have asked, I'm sorry, just to follow up, I'm wondering if that $15,000 is added on to their retirement amount, or is it a stipend?
I can't answer that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it does, but I can't
Okay.
answer that definitively.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm happy to ask the school committee for you.
Well, I mean, if I was a town employee looking to retire in 3 years, I'd be pretty upset that your friends across the way are getting something and you're not. So that might behoove, share information. But, yeah, it takes too much effort, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Article 9? Ms. Garzon.
I move that we recommend approval of Article 9, which has 4 different parts of it, as we have discussed in the warrant.
Second.
Well done. It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to approve Article 9, a consent article, which has, as moved and as listed in the warrant. Discussion. None heard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? None heard. Motion passes 9-0. A volunteer for the consent agenda, which is a good amount of work.
I don't mind taking that.
Jody, since everybody else stepped forward.
No, they
Exact
stepped
same time.
backwards.
That's a long one.
I thought it
Article
was
10.
backwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Article 10 is $35,000 for the Community Preservation Open Space Reserve Fund for the Oak Grove Farm Trail Improvement Project. I think you discussed that earlier this evening, so nothing else I have to add on that.
No?
No, I think it was very well covered.
Take a motion.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Garzon.
I move that we recommend approval of Article 10 to transfer $35,000 from the Community Preservation Open Space Reserve Fund to the Oak Grove Farm Trail Improvement Project.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to recommend approval of $35,000 from the Community Preservation Open Space Reserve Fund for the Oak Grove Farm Trail Improvement Project. Discussion. None heard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
One abstention, Mr. Chair, conflict of interest.
Okay. One abstention, so the motion passes 8-0.
And I'll take that
a
one.
volunteer, Mr. Stedman, thank you. Article 11.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Article 11 is our capital article. Just, I wanted to reference this sheet, if everyone got that in their packet. This is an important reference document for the capital items. In that, you'll see the items.
Hold on one second, please.
It's on the back of the budget.
Back of the budget or Mr. Barry's?
Separate sheet. Last in the
Back of
budget
the
sheets.
budget.
In that, you'll see all the capital requests for FY '24. You'll see the 7 that are being recommended and the 3 that are being recommended for deferral to the fall. So the total of the recommended articles is $658,757. Of that, $128,132 from the general fund, and the breakdown of that, of the general fund, is the $84,526 from cleaning up and clearing out a number of old articles. As you can see, the finance director's been busy trying to shake the tree.
Well done.
And also try to clean out these from the reports that have to be done on them every year. And the remaining $43,606 from certified free cash. And then the remainder of the funding would come from the various enterprise funds for some of those large enterprise projects. $333,732 from water, $167,262 from sewer, and $29,632 from stormwater. So the 6 items that are being recommended, the first one's from the DPW for a dump truck with plow and sander. The second one's also from DPW heavy-duty 10-ton trailer. The third one is from the library, and that's the library envelope repairs. The next one is the wireless upgrade for the school department at $68,000. Then there's this from the sewer enterprise, the FY 2024 infiltration and inflow investigation at $137,630. The water enterprise for the well number 3, PFAS final design, $272,900, and water enterprise chlorine pH analyzer replacement for $31,200. So that's the background. You see in the article the actual totals. The motion, which you'll have for your meeting next week, will outline the various funding sources to fund Article 11.
Yeah, I have a question
Ms. Garza.
on that motion. When we recommend funding, do we have to specify for each article?
Yes. Someone who doesn't mind a very long motion would have to take this one.
Well, it's not up for discussion. It's Mr. Loris.
Congratulations.
As
That
the-
will be a long-winded, that'll be a long-winded motion. That'll be a
Yeah.
page-long motion, because we have to clean out every, and we have to state which town meeting, the amount, and and go through each one. So
Tell your wife
the good
not
news
to
is, we'll do the motion for you. The bad news is you'll have to read it at the meeting.
Absolutely.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Mr.
and that's a good question. I mean, reading them at the meeting, but can't this be done with an appendix? So I've seen many warrants where they have the article, and then the appendix has the specifics, but it doesn't all have to be written in the warrant article. It's referred to the appendix.
That would be up to the moderator and town council. It's certainly something, if the finance committee is interested in modifying that, we'd have to just we'd have to have that inquiry through that.
I kind of have it out for John.
No,
leave it in
town
there.
meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, the less
I'll
we
drag
have
this out as long
to
as
extrapolate, the less we have to expound on at
that's a
town
good
meeting, which we saw last time, dragged on with items like this that really don't garner a lot of discussion unless you put it in people's faces. And then they start wondering why we're spending $3,000 for a water bottle or something, So-
Yeah, no, I understand. Usually, when we have these articles, it's only 3 or 4, at most 5 of these items. It's unusual when you have this many, so.
So my request is that you pose that question to the town attorney prior to writing of the motions, and that it be discussed, that you
It may be
discuss it
possible.
with the select board on Monday, that we
Yeah.
are requesting that it be written in accordance
Right.
with the recommendation.
If this was listed in the Finance Committee's informational flyer, it's possible
I
that you
certainly
could
can do that.
reference
See, now it's
the
back to me.
flyer.
It's less work for him and more work for me.
Um,
Nice job.
So I will, but it would have to be written somewhere where the general public has easy access at the town meeting of the information, but I'll certainly take a look at that.
Just let me know by the end of next week.
Yeah.
That's when, so I'll be writing, starting on like the 14th, I think.
Yeah.
Okay?
Mr. Chair?
That's all good
I'm
recommendations.
not trying to take work away from you.
I know you're not.
However, I think with the school budget situation, it might be necessary to go through this line item to ensure the town.
You're going to have to go through the top half of this.
Correct, understood.
The bottom half.
Understood.
I just think you will lose everybody.
So-
And nobody.
Agreed.
it's not-
Agreed.
you know, So,
Mr. Chair? Oh, please, John, go ahead.
Mr. Stedman.
I have a question about the heavy-duty 10-ton trailer. The capital planning committee had that as a low priority, so I'm curious why it is in this warrant if it was a low priority.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly.
The short
Mr.
answer
Lord.
is, usually the priorities are done because we're usually dealing with very limited funds for items. And so we defer for the enterprise items, we defer to the director to determine the relative priority of these, and if the required funds are available within the enterprise fund from which it's seeking the funding, then it's generally put forward. There's no other reason really to hold it. The reason that the library, the three items at the bottom aren't funded is there's simply no
Right.
general funds
Right.
for that. But the Director of Public Works has indicated that there are funds for these enterprise-related items.
Well, there's
So-
only 5750 coming out of general fund, but
That's
Right,
every,
right.
That is why.
every matter, every dollar matters.
It does.
I-
But the select board voted, again, the answer is because that's how the select board voted it, whether we agree with it or not. But I can tell you that in the past, rationale has been, the capital planning committee, and I don't know if rationale changed this year, but in the past, rationale has been, it's not, they don't prioritize, the prioritization has nothing to do with the cost of the item. It has to
Right.
do with number of
Absolutely.
factors other than cost.
Right.
Select
And
board
that was
just
low.
appears to have decided that they can spare $5,700 for a trailer out of the general fund.
Mr. Chair, I think, but this kind of goes back to something that Kathy had touched upon before, and that is that we don't always look at the enterprise funds the same way we look at taxed funds. But they are taxed funds, that the less we charge in water, it translates directly to the water user. So to think that, well, we've got money in there, so let's spend it.
I don't think that's what I said.
Well, no, I didn't say you said that. What I'm saying, and this is not you, this is enterprise funds all over the place.
I understand, but I did hear the discussion on this particular item, and I'm very sorry for cutting you off. But in this particular instance, I heard the DPW director say that this helps them operate more efficiently. They can put a piece of equipment and a compactor on one trailer and take one trip, and it's more efficient and less cost to the enterprise by doing this, by having a capital expenditure versus charging all of those hours for multiple trips. That was more or less, and I need to be quiet because Mr. Lohr is the.
Yeah, you want to finish your thought?
No.
Yes. I'm not talking about this specific item.
Yeah.
I'm talking in general with enterprise funds, that they're not some separate business. And I had this with the Dedham Westwood Water Company years ago, where I used to live. And they ran it like enterprise, and they somehow felt that they were entitled to charge whatever they wanted and spend whatever they wanted. I'm not saying that's the case here. But we sometimes get to a point with enterprise funds where, rather than reduce the cost to the consumer, we decide to do things, not necessarily always capital expenditures, but other things. And I just want to, emphasize that I think it's important that enterprise funds, like the town budget, like the school budgets, have to really look at the impact on the consumer as part of everything they do.
Oh, I fully appreciate that. I think in this instance, the select board, listened to a strong argument from the expert, the DPW director, that these were needed items, and felt that, you know, the relative benefit of purchasing, to use the 10-ton trailer as an example, was worth it to move forward at this time, even though it meant, you know, a little extra pinch on the general fund. And as I said, the director felt that it was, in the big picture, worthwhile for the enterprise funds to move ahead with this at this time. But your broader point is I take that, and I understand that broader point.
And just to add on, Mr. Chair, just to add on, with the CPC, what I learned is that really the committee is to evaluate and prioritize and not recommend. That's up to the select board to recommend. And that's how this list came about. So, you know, as Jonathan Berry said, all of these are important, and through the process of prioritizing them is what we did, and this is where we are right now.
Any problems with us? Any recommendations against us voting this tonight?
No, I see nothing holding, there's no major information that you're missing, there's nothing that would, I think, affect your vote.
Okay.
Yeah, I would recommend that you're ready to take a recommendation on it.
So I'll take a motion.
Mr. Chair, I recommend a motion that we vote to approve Article 11, see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of $658,757 to fund the following capital items. And these items are the dump truck, the trailer, the library envelope repairs, wireless upgrade, FY24 filtration and inflow investigation, well number 3, PFAS final design, and the chlorine analyzer replacement.
Second.
And I'd be happy to walk through the rest of the document here.
I'll synopsize it real
Okay.
quick. So it's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to recommend approval of Article 11, capital requests, in the total amount of $658,757 for the projects listed, and from the following fund sources: $128,132 from the general fund, $333,732 from the water enterprise fund, $167,262 from the sewer enterprise fund, and $29,632 from the stormwater enterprise fund. Discussion. None heard. I will make one question or one quick comment, and that is, I hate the title library envelope repairs. It does not describe in layman's terms what the project is. It will cause confusion. It should be a library roof repair or structural library.
Weatherization.
Yeah, weatherization. I know there are leaks. I know the leaks will get worse.
Building envelope or building
I just don't like the word
repairs?
envelope. To me, it's a term of,
Weatherization.
it's a term of art that not everybody will understand. And then the other comment I have is that nobody should expect that Carol's extraordinary abilities to draw water from a stone is going to continue, because every year.
You think you got them all?
Dry. There's
Yeah.
no more in the-
It's not even
And
an
that's the
envelope.
point I'm trying to
You
make.
got 'em
There's
all?
no lint, there's no crumbs under there, it's been scraped
Why am I
clean.
being
She's coming
charged
up
for
with
stormwater? Wait.
$221.
Why am I being charged for stormwater? Hold on.
So that's a good point. And Jody just mentioned that there's one of these for $221. That is literally budget dust. So kudos to you. Nobody should expect you to do that every year, to be able to do that every year. And we know you'll try, and so I want to thank you for that. So any further discussion? None heard? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None heard? Motion passes 9-0, and John Lohr is on the hook for at least part of reading the motion.
Bring it on.
Okay. Article 12,
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Reyes.
are Articles 12 and 13, are they just voting to authorize?
That's correct. They're just authorizing, those funds would come out of those respective budgets. So this is just an authorization, those are just authorization articles.
So I believe we technically have to vote it as borrowing, right?
That's why. These require a two-thirds vote because the lease is considered under state law borrowing. So that's the only reason these are here separately, is to a two-thirds vote for the borrowing authorization. And the dollars just show you the maximum amount that could be spent under that authorization.
So my ask is that whoever ends up with these articles at town meeting, they're most of their discussion comments, or at least a portion of the discussion comments, has to clarify the reason that we're doing this is because we're required
Right.
for an authorization to borrow. We've already voted this potentially in Article 3, the appropriation.
Can I ask to do Articles 12 and 13 if nobody else wants them?
If it passes,
If it
and
passes.
if you're in the majority.
Would that be okay?
Yes.
If it doesn't pass,
Yep.
Huh?
Definitely.
Let's vote on it.
Well, that's why I asked if it does.
Yeah, yeah,
Hard
yes, I
on
understand,
you,
I understand. Okay, so I'll take a motion from Sarah.
Well,
Ms. Reyes?
Okay, go ahead. I wanted to discuss Article 12 a little bit. but
You want to
we can do
discuss it
later.
before we have a motion?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I know with the
Yes.
police cruisers, those leases, and I always got confused between open-end and closed-end, but that at the end of the lease, we have the vehicle basically for $1, and the chief continues to run those. I don't know if that's the same with the school buses, and if there's any chance to, if they're fully paid for, run some or all of them another year, which would reduce the lease expense in the school budget.
I believe that's the case, but we can get confirmation from the superintendent and business manager on the purchase, on the back-end purchase end of that, but I think that's been their practice, and I think that's the intent here, but we can confirm that for you.
Right, because if, I guess this is replacing existing buses. It's not new
That's correct.
buses. So if they
That's
can
correct.
extend the life of some of these,
And I think they do try, to the extent they can safely
Well-
extend the life of those. I can tell you that, just for further clarification, for Article 12, I believe it's a 5-year lease, and Article 13 is a 3-year lease.
right, but
So
it's still,
to Mr. Stedman's point, which I think is an excellent point, and shame on us for not realizing it until now, or somebody else not realizing it before now. We'll defer these. We won't vote them. We will go back to both school, police, and town and say, these replacement schedules are theoretical. They're like a server. Servers last 7 years, you replace them 7 years. Well, if you're in a budget mess, for lack of a better word, why not do a no-kidding evaluation of that vehicle and that bus that is scheduled to be replaced on a theoretical replacement schedule and say, what is the risk of doing that? And so I would like for that question to be posed.
Well, I can confirm for the Article 13 that the average life of a police cruiser here is 7 years, and that this will be purchased, the cruiser will be purchased at the end of the lease, and it will be utilized as long as the repair costs don't outweigh the operational benefit of the vehicle.
and you cut this from 2 to 1, right?
Yes.
So let us just ask the question, and
Okay.
we'll vote it next week.
That's
Mr. Chair, could I get clarification? Mr. Stedman, did you mention that the lease expenses are already in the school budget?
They are in the budgets, yes.
In their budget?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Same with the police cruiser. That's in the
Yeah,
chief's budget.
it's in the budget.
Budget.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll assign those articles tentatively to Sarah for 12 and 13, and we will discuss further and vote next week. Okay? Article 14.
Mr. Chairman, this, I believe you addressed this early this evening.
Yep, we
with
did.
Mr. Gibbons.
Yep. I'll take a motion.
I move to vote on Article 14 in favor.
Okay, so you're recommending approval?
Approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that committee recommend approval on Article 14, which is a statement of support for net zero 2050 goals. Discussion. So I personally have a hard time with setting goals that are unattainable and potentially, I just don't like goals that are very, very, not nebulous, because I don't think this is nebulous, and this is where I'll end up with this, but it's just, what does this mean, and how would we possibly get there? And that's my initial reaction to this. I did discuss this with Mr. Gibbons prior to the meeting, And essentially, he hit the points that would get me to vote on this, to recommend approval on that, and that is the town receives funds for reduction of greenhouse gases, energy products, whether it be the streetlights or more efficient, building equipment and things like that. And that's definitely the selling factor of declaring that this is a town's goal. And it is a town goal. It is not every citizen, every private citizen is subject to reducing their greenhouse gases. So I will vote in favor of this.
And for, my motion, I basically think about it in somewhat the same way, in that it's aspirational and an encouragement, as opposed to setting a goal today and then having to force us to live up to that goal. So I have no problem with it on that basis.
Concur.
Okay. No further discussion heard. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? None heard. Motion passes 9-0.
Can I take this one, Mr. Chair? I don't have an article yet.
Unless there's an argument from anybody else. Mr. Underhill, it's all yours. I just need to do a little bit of arithmetic here, tabulation. Thank you. One. Oh, he has not. Yeah, he does have one. Mr. Cron, number 5. Okay, Article 15.
Mr. Chairman, Article 15 was submitted by the Board of Health, a plastic bag reduction bylaw. I think they've already reported to you. They're trying to clarify the language of that bylaw by deleting the prior one and replacing it with what's in the warrant.
Ms. Garzon.
I move that we recommend approval of Article 15 to replace the plastic bag reduction bylaw as written.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to vote to recommend approval of Article 15 amendment and clarification of the plastic bag reduction bylaw. All the discussion? None heard? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And
I don't mind
a
taking that.
volunteer? How many do you have?
I have just one.
Okay, Jody.
I have a very long one, and this will add to mine. I don't know, did he? Did you want it?
No, I want the citizens petition. That's what we were talking
All
about.
right.
Sorry.
Have at it. I
I'm
don't
jumping
like all the
ahead.
citizens petitions.
Nope, I
Article
enjoy it.
19, Peter Underhill.
Yep.
Article 16, please.
Mr. Chairman, on Article 19, I'd like to reconsider my vote on that. In thinking about it, I would,
Okay, just hold on for 1 second.
Okay.
We'll get there. Article 16.
Mr. Chairman, this is for, to appropriate a sum of money for the unemployment insurance fund. I believe the recommendation for this from the administration will be $25,000 towards that fund. There is already a balance in that fund that we're adding this to, and we think that will be sufficient to at least get us to the fall town meeting.
And that would come from free cash?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Garzon.
I move that we recommend approval of Article 16 in the amount of $25,000 from free cash to fund the unemployment insurance fund.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to recommend approval of Article 16, funding of $25,000 from free cash to the unemployment insurance fund. Discussion.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Underhill.
It's my understanding that with the transfer of money to the schools, there is no free cash available. Is there $25,000?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
The amount in Article 4 is the balance of what would be left from what we need. We don't need, we haven't set aside a ton, but the balance is going,
Thank you.
it's expected to be for the school.
Should that be up to $25,000, just in case you run into a...
Well, you can always reduce it at town
You can always
meeting.
reduce it.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask an informational question about it?
Ms. Harden.
Lisa Harden, 56 Walnut. I'm just not clear how it works. If the schools, I'm just wondering, if the school's going to increase, have a significant increase in their layoffs, would that mean that there'd be a bigger increase than normal in the unemployment, in the use or the need for money in the unemployment fund?
Yes, because the town is self-insured when it comes to unemployment, so we would have to pay all of the claims that come through. In today's labor market, more than likely, the people would be able to find a job pretty quickly, but we still need sufficient funding in the unemployment fund to cover anybody that is unable to find a position.
And there is currently a balance.
We do have a balance. Right now, we have about 100,000 in that fund.
Oh, okay.
We do have a couple of people collecting off of that right now, but we should still have about 100,000 going into the town meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Good
Because
question.
I was just thinking that because there's so many from the presentation about the increase in the sped funding in lots of towns, that there would be an increase in the number of teachers laid off, and that it might be difficult for them to find another job. That's all. It's just a
Right,
comment.
Right.
I just wondered.
Right. I know it's been mentioned to me that the town of Framingham is looking for 60 teachers. So I don't know if other towns are in the same situation, but, okay. But, and I'm not sure what the makeup is of whatever's going to happen at the school, but I think there's a possibility that not everyone would have to collect unemployment for a long period of time.
Thank you. Any further discussion on Article 16? I believe we have a motion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
I'll take
Motion-
that one if you want me to.
Motion passes 9-0. John Stedman. John Stedman wins number 16. Article 17.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Article 17 is for the establishment of a special education stabilization fund in accordance with MGL Chapter 40, Section 13E, and to appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money to that fund. I do not anticipate there'll be any funds actually transferred to that account at the Springtown meeting. That's more likely to happen at the Fall Town meeting, depending on the situation at that time. But I think it's felt that it's important to at least set up the special education stabilization fund, so it's set up in a part of our different accounts.
So this would just be to establish the fund?
That's correct.
Exactly.
Okay.
Would there be any downside to deferring this until the November meeting? Because special education will be such a hot topic.
It could be deferred. When our plan, there is no plan to put money into this.
I
now,
realize that. It's just
because-
authorizing it.
Right,
Just authorizing
because
it.
if we were to fund this, it would,
Right.
it would be a difficult thing for them to be able to get any money out of it this year.
Right, yeah. I understand that. So
Right.
I'm just asking the question.
Sure.
I mean, I think that, would there be any particular harm? No, but I think the select board felt there's no harm of just having it set up. I think that was their thought process on it when we discussed it, and at the time it was originally thought to put on there. There was discussion of whether or not any funds would be put into it
Right.
in the spring, but right now, that's not the approach. But I would expect if the Finance Committee is in support of setting this up, certainly in your informational flyer, you can state there's no intent of putting funds
Right,
in this.
which I
at this
understand.
time,
Yeah.
And that at the fall, it'll be considered whether or not it's appropriate to add funds to it. But this is sort of getting people used to the idea of having this there and.
Yeah, and we did that for the ambulance fund last
Right,
year.
right.
So I know it's the same thing, but just,
Mr. Cron.
I'm just wondering. the
I
timing.
actually think this may be the exact right time to do this, because what it's saying to the people is, we've seen this problem, now we have to start addressing it on a going-forward basis. So
If
this might
things
be
are-
the best time to
Okay,
do it.
that's fine.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
I move that we recommend approval of Article 17, which would establish a special education stabilization fund.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to approve Article 17, establishment of a special education fund. Discussion? None heard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None heard. Motion passes 9-0. Article 17, I'll assign to Joyce. Article 18 will go to Mr. Crone.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
I move that we recommend dismissal of Article 18 because we won't have the funds to put into the stabilization fund.
Second.
Can you
Is that
rephrase
right?
your motion?
Be,
Well, if I could just provide a little background on that. I mean, certainly, if the budget goes as presented, there will be no funds available to be put in there. Funds will actually have been drawn out.
right.
But we usually do have this here just in case strange things happen at town meeting and there's free cash left to be put in there. That's not part of the current recommendations, but we just want to make sure there's a place to land for any remaining funds.
So I could revise my motion to recommend at town meeting.
Or you could recommend that no funds be put into the stabilization at this time, and then you could change your recommendation at town meeting, during the town meeting, should something happen that would make a change to that.
I understand what you're saying, given that if Article 17 passes, if there were places to put free cash, we just voted stabilization fund, we still have a bona fide need for stabilization. You know,
Whatever
perhaps it
the
just goes
finance committee is
there.
comfortable with, we just want to make sure we relayed what the thought process was. And certainly, based on current recommendations, there would be no funds to put in there.
I like leaving it and basically just saying, even though I just said something different, but I like leaving it, saying it's zero, because again, it's just another indication that, of what we're doing. I mean, we will have already
So-
crossed that bridge way up front in town meeting.
It would be to recommend approval of the article for $0.
Let's not recommend the transfer of any funds into the stabilization fund.
Isn't that
That
just
that would be
recommending?
voting, yeah, that would be voting.
That's just recommending dismissal.
Recommending
then.
dismissal, then.
To see the town vote and appraise appropriate vote.
That's
Put
typically what
$10 in it.
that's typically what we've done. We've
Yeah.
recommended dismissal of stabilization and OPEB.
Like
when
I
we
said,
haven't
whatever
had
the
money
finance
to
committee is
put in.
comfortable with, I'm just conveying to you the thought process.
So you want a place to
Whatever
land.
you're comfortable with is fine.
Exactly.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Underhill?
we've been down this road before. I think we should go as Jody moved and was seconded for this article to avoid confusion at town meeting.
Approve it.
And then
Recommend dismissal is,
we could always have a discussion
You could always change your.
prior to town meeting
Right.
to say if we, here's a alternative motion, if we have funds that we need to put in, here's the motion that we could make. Because we've changed our recommendation before town meeting at our meeting.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, this is the article, which is going to say what it says right now. The motion can say anything we want it to, provided that legally it's sufficient and the attorney, may change. So if we say we recommend $0 be transferred to stabilization, some legalese of that, we can do that.
Yes.
Having answered that, I'll take a motion, whatever you guys want to do. We're
Well,
going to
see,
vote on it, so it's not, I'm not telling you what to say.
If I could just say one thing, it says, to see if the town will vote to raise an appropriate, to see if the town will vote to raise an appropriate or transfer from available funds. So obviously, we're not talking about putting money in that we don't have. So it would only be from available funds. So I don't see how it hurts or it sets any kind of a tone at town meeting that we're trying to fund this with money we don't have, because it could only come from available funds. And if you think you need it because you might need a place to park money, then on that basis, I think it makes sense to go along with it. That would be my opinion.
Well, that's the reason why the select board wouldn't want to withdraw the article. Now, the motion may change on the floor from the finance committee if something happens at the town meeting or something happens with expected revenues between now and the town meeting, but it's there just as a placeholder. And if the finance committee is looking at a place and time, like as of today, we're recommending dismissal, but that at the town meeting, you can always open that up and change that if conditions change.
The last thing I'll say on it, and again, then we can move on, is that this language that we're reading does not matter. It doesn't get read. It's just a description of the article that will go out. What matters is the motion, because the motion will get read. And that said, we've gone through all these motions, and we're trying to tie everything together for consistency and clarity. And having a motion that says we recommend $0 appropriated and transferred to stabilization is consistent with everything that we've already done. And it gives us the option for a little bit of flexibility if something were to change.
And in that vein, Mr. Chair, how come they didn't just fund OPEB at 0 rather than remove the article?
Well, I would, if I may.
Yeah, thank
It was
you.
because I think the preference of the select board, because of the other issues with stabilization, would be if they need to park money, they'd prefer to park it in stabilization than in OPEB at the town meeting. So they needed some place to do it. They chose between the two, and they chose the stabilization with the understanding that OPEB is sort of a one-way street. You put money in OPEB, you don't really pull it back out. You put money in stabilization, yeah, you need a 2/3 vote, but town meeting could pull it out at a later time. And the plan is to put money in OPEB at the fall town meeting, with free cash that's available. So that's the plan. And again, it's really just a placeholder, and they needed one article as a placeholder for any budgetary issues that were to come up during the town meeting.
Okay, I'll take a motion from anybody that is so compelled to make one.
I already made a motion and it was seconded.
You did?
Yes, to dismiss the article.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to dismiss the article, and I'm sorry.
No worries.
It's past
It
my
was a
bed-
while ago.
It's past my bedtime.
And this is the one I got it right, huh?
It's usually pretty easy.
It's usually one of the easy ones.
All those in favor of dismissal, say aye.
Aye.
All those in favor of voting against dismissal, say nay.
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 Okay, so now we'll do a roll call. All those in favor of dismissal, please say yay when called. Sarah.
Nay.
Mr. Stedman.
I'm a nay.
Mr. Underhill.
Yay.
Ms. Boyardi.
Nay.
Mr. Berube, I'll come back to me. Ms. Garzon.
Yay.
Mr. Lohr.
Nay.
Sorry, say it again.
Nay?
Nay, thank you.
With an I. As a no?
Ms. McGinnis.
Nay.
Mr. Crone.
Nay.
I will be a nay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Motion fails 7-2.
Mr. Chairman, I move to vote approval of Article 18 as written.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to recommend approval of Article 18 as written. Discussion. None heard. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
And I heard Joyce and Peter. I mean, Jody and Peter.
I've been called worse.
Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been called worse.
Deirdre, the motion to recommend approval passes 7-2.
Okay, great.
Really?
If I were reading that, I would say that was sarcastic, or we just woke her up.
Do you do do you do like corollaries, like for those who voted against it can write their recommendation?
So we do minority reports, but it has to be
Minorities,
6-3.
Oh, 6-3.
Jesus, sorry. Scared I woke myself up.
Deirdre's up now.
All right. As always, I really appreciate everybody's just willingness to work through these and plow through them, and everybody's inputs. Thank you very much. I think we are fulfilling our duty well, and so I thank you for that, and the good discussion from both the audience and the committee. Board and committee liaison updates, any? None heard? Finance Committee minutes.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon.
I move that we approve the Finance Committee meeting minutes of March 22nd as written.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. The committee vote to approve the minutes from March 22nd. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion passes 9-0.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Discussion, so the discussion point is, we got through a lot of work tonight. Soon, I just need to say that the first thing that's due for everybody to write up is their motion synopsis, 2 sentences on the article that you were assigned. There are examples of this aggregated document on the website. Deirdre, could you send out last year's just as an example of what will be due after next week, so probably be due Friday of next week? But could you send out an example from, say, the last 2 town meetings, the synopsis document?
Absolutely. I just, I'm not sure who was assigned. I have a couple questions. I have Joyce, Article 1, John 2, Pete 3 and 4.
Deirdre, I'll go through these with you tomorrow. I'll confer with Jody and make sure we have the same notes, and I will send you an email with these, just so that we don't keep going tonight. So we'll wrap this up. And any more discussion?
Okay.
Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.